Okay, here we are, and
Test. Back on. We're coming back on the air after an interruption.
there we go. Welcome to another edition of Night Talk. Hold on a second. Looks like my computer is very laggy tonight. Wow. Hold on. There we go. Okay. Yeah, we have so much content loaded into StreamYard, I believe I've broken it. So anyway, um, good to see everybody. I'm sure people will be loading in here soon, but let's bring on the person that's going to be assisting me in this crazy venture tonight. Uh, Night of the Living Dead historian and author John Scoleri. Welcome, John. Come on down.
Hey,
Welcome, John. Thanks for
great to be back.
taking the time to do this crazy undertaking that we're about to do tonight. A rousing edition of Who's That Ghoul? Actually, the first edition of Who's That Ghoul, and hopefully we will be identifying as many people as possible from the original Night of the Living Dead. This was your idea. Why did you want to do this?
Well, you know, that music is going to drive me crazy.
There we go.
The funny thing is, I, I'm a Night of the Living Dead diehard, like a lot of the folks that'll be tuning in tonight. But as many people know, for the past several years, we've had this book project in the works, and it's coming,
Yes.
and it's exciting, and the delays, COVID, supply chain are all going to turn out to be in our benefit because of new images that'll be available to us. But one of the real important things to me in the book was trying to identify as many of the people that appear in the photos that we've got.
Great.
And so, you and I have talked a lot about who those folks are. And when this opportunity came up, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to kind of go through the film and actually try and pick out everybody that appears on screen that we can, put a name with the face. Particularly for the Night fans, everybody knows the main cast. And thanks to the Living Dead festivals and the Living Dead weekend, there's a lot of the supporting actors, Ghoul's posse members that people have gotten to know and meet, and interact with. But there's this kind of tertiary element of those other names that, some of them are in the credits, And some of them, have just been heard in the stories of the making of Night of the Living Dead, but the people I don't think know. They don't know when they're looking at Jack Givens on screen, or maybe they don't even know who Roger McGovern is. But I thought for those of us that love Night of the Living Dead, that really kind of want to get deep into it, this would be a really cool way to kind of share some of that knowledge and surprise some folks with who shows up, and in some cases how often.
And there's a lot of, as we also had talked about the other day, there's a lot of bad information out there. So part of what Image 10 tries to do is to get the correct information out there. And A
Yeah,
Night
if
of
anybody
Living Dead
has
just, it's,
IMDb in
uh,
preparation for tonight, they're going to be
yeah,
surprised.
it's, there, there's just been uh, a lot of um, attention paid to this film, but like up to a certain point, and it doesn't reach the level of accuracy or scholarship of like Alfred Hitchcock, an Alfred Hitchcock film, or where just books and books are written. A lot of time, even when something is written by somebody that does have knowledge about it, it only goes so far, and so we'd like to clear that up. I want to point out, Daz, the webmaster, has been doing a great job um, on image10.com. That's image-10.com with identifying as many people behind the scenes as possible, and um, just acknowledging their lives and their, and how they kind of came into the orbit of the production and ended up in the film. And he's been doing a good job putting faces to names as well. Um,
Yeah.
and that's what we want to happen with this website. As Gary has said many times, Gary Striner from Image 10, is this should be the place where everybody can eventually go, and they can go there now and get a lot of good information that hasn't been out there, or clears up inaccurate information. But in the future, it's just going to keep expanding. It's a work in progress, and after 54 years, it's great that there is this source now for information, which is image-10.com. So everybody go there and visit. There's even a forum there, and there's a lot of good, updated news on Night of the Living Dead. I wanted to talk about two things before we get started on Who's That Ghoul? Some Night of the Living Dead news. If anybody's been following Facebook, there's currently a Japanese theatrical release of Night of the Living Dead. It's the first time it's ever happened in Japan. It kind of caught Image 10, or those of us at Image 10, by surprise because we weren't aware of how extensive this was going to be, or how well they were going to treat the film. I mean, we knew that the film would be well treated, but they've really gone. The distributors and the merchandisers have just gone over and above, and their presentation and their merchandising and the attention they've paid to merchandising, and then even the fun they've had with it has been fantastic. So
Has anybody reported on the taste of the Living Dead jerky,
the corpse jerky.
the corpse jerky?
Yeah, not yet. We haven't heard. We haven't heard anything about that. So, but did you happen to get any items yet from Japan?
I'm waiting on my original Chirashi posters,
Chirashi. Okay.
and I'm keeping an eye out for other things popping up on eBay.
So,
I am doing program books.
so I can report that Image 10 will be able to offer that merchandise to everybody over here because it is great merchandise. So we, worked
Excellent.
it out with the distributor to get some quantity of that, and so then this way, uh, you and everybody else doesn't have to, try to buy it from Japan and deal with the shipping and all the middleman services and all that stuff. But
That's
in
great
some
news.
cases, if you do want, like, say, the t-shirts are notoriously expensive in Japan. Um, most apparel is. It's more than what we're used to paying here in the USA. If somebody does want that merchandise, it is starting to pop up online from the various manufacturers. So if you're interested in that, just could email me through Image 10. It's through the Image 10 website. It's manager@image10.com. So if anybody wants to know how to purchase some of this other merchandise that we're not going to be bringing in from Japan, I can give you the pointers on how to do it. And the other thing I wanted to mention that's in the news is we're at the tail end of getting the trading card set from the Kickstarter done. So we should be getting notice any day from Richard at the designer and producer of the trading cards. So, but supposedly they already went to print, and he's just waiting on the notice that they're being shipped. So, hallelujah, we're finally done with that. But we're happy with how it came out. Again, this is like what you were saying with your book. Um, you know, because it's uh, because it's us doing it, and we're not working with like a larger company that has deadlines and everything. We could take our time on it and make sure it's as good as it can possibly be. And that's really where Richard and I got bogged down, going back and forth and tweaking things. And they're based on lobby cards, and it was but you didn't want to just reproduce the lobby cards. You wanted to add something new. So we went through all kinds of photos, but we also didn't want to have photos that were too rare because it should be something that you saw back in the 70s. It should be one of those photos. So we went back and forth with that, and it really came out great. And then there were things like, wow, these look great. They actually look a little bit too great. Now, do we want to distress these? But everybody does that. We don't really want to do that. So, Richard, to his credit, he listened to every little nitpick that I had and really nudged this project to where it is, including the text on the back. We did a lot of. We wanted to have like really solidly researched material on the back instead of like the junk that you used to read on trading cards from the 70s. Usually just made up stuff. But yeah, that's finally going to be coming, and all the Kickstarter people who waited, such as yourself, we'll be getting some bonuses that Richard and I put together. So
Cool.
that's thanks to everybody for waiting for that. That's our thanks to everybody waiting for that. Let's see, we got a lot of people watching here. We have Dwayne. He's posting as Thomas. I believe that's his son, but he told me before it's him. And who else we got here? Craig is here. Howdy, Craig, and Gino Blair, and Madison, and Will Phelps. Bunch of people watching. Well, they're the ones commenting. There's more people watching. But
Hey,
so
there's
anyway,
a Russ Striner who's watching.
oh really?
Hey, Russ.
Just wait till he starts commenting. Then we're gonna have to stop what we're doing. But anyway, and I want to mention at the 11th hour here, Russ came through with a new person that we never, a new name to a face that we've never found before. So we will be mentioning that
Breaking news.
person, and I'll give you breaking news. But yeah, we don't have the mobile unit tonight because Gary's not on. Gary, I think, is watching as well. So, hey, Gary. Anyway, let's get started with who's that ghoul. I
Hey,
think we're going to be
Gary.
here for a while. So, um, just some ground rules of what we're doing here. We're not going to be bringing. This is strictly who's in the film, who we could identify in the film, shot by shot. John and I have gone through the film several times here in order to put it in chronological order. We're going to be putting it, and we wanted to have all the screenshots, the pertinent screenshots up instead of scrolling through the video because my computer's never going to be able to handle that. It was tough
And
enough when we
sometimes
were
it's
doing
like
it, right? Yeah,
use
when
the
we were
right
doing it, it was
frame.
yeah, it was really hard to do it when we were doing it. So, and that was just us. So, here now broadcasting to Facebook, it's like forget it. My computer would probably crash and die, and it probably wouldn't come back either. So, we're just sticking with the people that are in the film, that are seen in the film. There's going to be people that appear in photographs. Unfortunately, they do not appear in the film, so we're not covering those people tonight. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep count of each unique performer as they come up, and John's going to give us a little ding as we have a unique performer come up in a screenshot, and then we will also be keeping track separately of uh, those who appear in multiple roles. That will be the Night Talk Daily Double. Yeah. So when you hear those sound effects, um, we are keeping track of everybody here. So let's get started with who's that ghoul. So
Actually,
we're
two
going
two
to
more things I want to say, Jim, just so
sure,
folks are clear. A character that becomes a ghoul, but is the same character as a ghoul, doesn't get counted multiple times. Um,
right.
but for those of you who think you've got a good handle on this, you might throw some guesses in the chat as to who you think has, as a performer, has the most appearances in different roles in the film. It'll be interesting to see um, by the end of the night who knows their ghouls and posse members. And
And certainly send your comments, and um, we will be keeping track here as we go along. I see a few people have already. John Volo's there. How you doing? He's saying there's one ghoul. I want to know who it is because I don't think there is any. I don't think they're in any other scene. That is quite possible. I think there's a number of people like that.
and there are
So,
some folks that
yeah.
unfortunately we can't identify.
There's a good number of folks that we can't identify. So, especially when you get into the posse scenes, and but we are hoping that this gets everybody excited to find out some of these other people. That's why I'm glad Russ and Gary are watching. This may jog some people's memory, or they might start asking some questions, and then we'll be really excited to find some new people. So
Yep.
it has happened before, so it can happen again. So anyway, here we are with our first one, and this is first person in the first scene is actually Gary Striner driving the Pontiac Le Mans, and Gary basically drove it through most of these shots. Now we are gonna be talking about a few uh, side topics, um, essentially about how the film was made as these things come up. Uh, the driving through the countryside and the cemetery scenes were famously shot in two different batches. One at the beginning, one at the very beginning of the film on location there, and then another batch at the near the end of the film when they were picking up the shots in the cemetery scene. That's when Bill Heinzman came in, um, and uh, and then there was a lot of pickup shots with that. So this kind of ties into what we're doing here. That they're that just kind of shows a little bit about the production. We're able to identify when things were done, as well as um, the different batches of ghouls, the different groups of ghouls, give us an idea of how things progressed in the production and how things were shot, because certain people play more than one ghoul, and as their costume changes, you can tell, well, that was a different night, and then we're able to kind of um, we're able to coordinate that with scenes that were shot. It's okay. This batch of ghouls was in that scene, and then this batch of ghouls maybe jumps ahead later is in another scene, and so forth. So we're going to be talking about that as we go along. But so the car was driven at least in some shots by Gary, so that much we know. Gary's the first on our scoreboard, and then we of course come to the cemetery, and we have our two leads here, and that would be Judy O'Day and Russ Striner. Oops. It's going to take me a little bit to get the hang of this. And it is a little awkward. Like I said, I've completely maxed out StreamYard here with all this stuff. But uh, and I should also point out these frames of the film that I have here they have been lightened up a little bit, or at least the contrast has been made so you can see things a little bit better. While the first two characters park at the cemetery, we get a radio broadcast, or a piece of a radio broadcast coming back in, and that is none other than Carl Hardman. So Carl's first appearance in the film is his voice. And moving right along, we come to this dashing gentleman, and that
Bill
is
Hinsman
Bill
of the
Heinzman.
long hair variety.
Yes. So this is interesting. As you what is it? Gary's saying that's my foot in that shot. Wait, all right, we got to go back there.
Gotta go back to the since
There is a foot.
still the
There it
same
is.
role.
I don't know, John. Do we count that?
I think he's playing the same foot that he was driving the car with. So
Ah, that's true. Okay, so yeah, he's standing in for Johnny. So okay, we'll leave it as is. So that's Gary's uh, first
but
uh,
that's
first
why we're
appearance
doing
in the
this,
film
to
is
get
as a
that level of
stand-in.
detail.
He's kind of like the stunt driver for Johnny. So we're stand-in for Johnny. So and for Russ. Um, but getting back to Bill, uh, pay attention to his hair. You could see even in this shot, the previous shot, his hair is long, and he's going to pop up later with much shorter hair. And this was the topic that we were talking about, the continuity of the film. This was basically, or the filming. This was basically a pickup scene. They went back, and so this would have been in the fall, and they went back and filmed this. Prior to this, Jack Russo was going to play the cemetery ghoul, and there's some behind the scenes, couple behind the scenes photos of him in ghoul makeup. That's what, and he's standing in the cemetery. That's what that is. It's not the ghouls that he later appears as in the film. So that's not counted here. But again, the interesting thing about this is it shows us how the film was made. It starts giving us an indication of the process, and then also the schedule, or the schedule of how they had to film things in order to go back and get what they needed. Case in point would be this. These are two ghouls that show up after Barbara's at the house, and it's starting to become established that there's more than one of these crazy people, and they're starting to surround the house. Crazy, slow walking people. The reason we've upped the count is because the gentleman on the left is Regis Servinsky, better known as the special effects pyrotechnics expert who blew up the truck and fabricated the squibs along with his partner Tony Pantanella. So Regis pops up in the film in numerous places, but I don't have a shot of it right now. But if you watch the film, this shot comes right after a shot of Bill Heinzman essentially standing in the same place. And then when Barbara looks over, she sees these two guys, and Bill's hair is longer, which tells us that's way after most of the production had wrapped, and they had to go back to the house to get these pickup shots. Once it was established that Bill was the cemetery ghoul, you also had to have him chasing Barbara, which you'll notice in this. Once they leave the cemetery, you never see them in the same shot together, because all of that stuff. Russ or Gary could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Barbara running on the road was, and through the farmhouse property, that's some of the first stuff that was filmed. So it was known that she was going to be running from an attacker in the cemetery. They just didn't know who that was going to be at that point. So all of this stuff with Bill kind of, confused, coming out of the wooded area, and then kind of like confused that, he kind of like circles the house and is just looking and tears down a clothesline. All of that stuff would have been filmed after to get them to get George the material that he needed.
And Jim, did we determine this is the only shot of Reed in this particular Ghoul
Yes,
outfit?
exactly. So, the other gentleman we can't identify. Maybe if I blow that up, Russ or Gary or somebody could figure out who that person is, because he has a kind of distinctive build. But um, yeah, this would have been like when nobody else was around. Obviously, Regis was there. Um, I don't know who the other fella is, but you tend to see that for the pickup shots. That the pickup shots would include the bonfire at the end. We have all these shots with the posse, and then all of a sudden there's new posse members because those people would have been the production crew standing in, which we're going to get to as we get there. You see this, and yeah, Russ is saying no leaves on the ground. When Barbara runs, tons of leaves here, and he's correct. If this was in color, we would notice that. But it's kind of like it fits into the flow of the film, and you don't really pay much attention to the little details like that. And the black and white absolutely helps in this regard.
Yeah.
Now we have we're not going to give our friend a ding here, but this is the first appearance of Manny Quinn, the production's mannequin. Uh, there's several shots that we're going to point out where there was a mannequin involved. I know that they had more than one mannequin. I'm not sure how many times they used different mannequins, but you'll see as we go along. This was actually the second um, model kit corpse that George, or model kit skull that George added some modeling clay and some silly putty and paint, and made and some crepe hair, and made a pretty effective looking corpse. And it's not a ping pong ball for the eye. If you've ever seen one of these model kits, a ping pong ball would absolutely not fit in that eye socket. So the model kit actually comes with an eyeball that you can put in. So, um, but the first appearance of a mannequin, and then we have the star of the movie, Mr. Dwayne Jones, and oops, forgive me, I am slow with my I'm slow with my numbering
Hey,
system.
Dwayne's number one. Come on.
Yeah, Dwayne's number one. So we're up to seven, and now Dwayne arrives at the farmhouse, and soon after, he he and Barbara are startled by these guys. Now this is really interesting. Um, this is the first appearance of Jack Russo, and he's the fellow here we can see from his profile. He's the one smashing the headlights out, and what we can't tell is this next photo, next screenshot. Um, this gentleman here on the left side, and John's prepared for when we fail. Um, we can't tell who this gentleman is, but what's interesting is um, this must have been a pickup shot um, when they could focus on getting a good shot of the headlights being smashed. So Jack stood in. You'll notice this gentleman is about to disappear in a second, or he's going to change it to somebody else, and also Jack being
Jack is going to
a
change
little
too.
Yeah, a little bit shorter than the next guy. You could see he doesn't quite fill out the jacket as much. When Ben, so Ben and Barbara are startled by these two guys smashing at the truck, and then the very next thing, Ben goes out to confront these guys, and now we have two entirely different ghouls, and we know both of them. The first is Terry Gandell. He's the fella on the left. Hold on a second. I am off by a number here. I'm going to be off by two numbers. So let me fix that.
Nope. Yeah, because if Dwayne was 7,
Yeah, Jack was 8,
Jack was
and
8.
Terry Gandell is 9, and you gave him a ding, and then this next fella is going to be number 10, and this is Jackie Faust's brother, Thomas Faust, and they're the first two ghouls that get the tire iron in their heads and get beaten to a pulp. Um, you get you just get caught up here. John, you can talk if you want while I'm pushing buttons and crap.
Yeah, I was going to say, and actually, this is also going to bring up our next appearance of Manny.
Yes. So the next thing we have, well, one thing I want to point out. So we're starting to get into the ghouls, and everybody has their favorite ghoul. So we'd like to see in the comments, what people um, have to say about, you know, who's the ghoul that who had the most impact for you, or maybe scared the crap out of you. Let me see here. John Volo is saying that was the ghoul I was talking about earlier. I'm not sure which one you're talking about, John. So you can just put that in the comments. And another person here says, "Oh, it's actually Brandon." Is saying, "Seeing these pictures just reminds me how much I love the lighting in this. Has there ever been a discussion about the cinematography?" There has. Pick up the documentary Autopsy of the Dead, as well as One for the Fire. Both of those documentaries talk about the lighting and the cinematography and why certain choices were made about that. And now here is the
Very
second
interesting.
appearance of our friend the mannequin. This one actually has a head on it and is uh, about to get beat by Dwayne. Um, what happens in this scene is there's like a little bit of sleight of hand with Dwayne winding up and probably making contact to this mannequin head. But on the contact, George cuts to Dwayne swinging the tire iron and the camera kind of following Terry Gandell as he falls backwards. So it's like an effective way to get that impact, so that you really feel it, or the audience really feels it. And then
Manny really
next,
felt it.
there he is, our first daily double, Night Talks daily double. So we got this is the second appearance of John Russo in about 3 minutes, or less than 3 minutes, uh, as a distinctly different ghoul. And he's the one that wrestles with Dwayne in the living room and then gets the tire iron right through his head. And that quickly follows to this gentleman. This is John Razzo, not to be confused with John Russo. They also, some of his family posted, they used to call this gentleman Jack, so Jack Razzo, John Razzo, but he's the bathrobe ghoul who gets also gets the tire iron in his face.
And most importantly, he's wearing Russ's bathrobe.
Yes. And uh, the bathrobe shows up elsewhere, right?
Manny puts on the bathrobe.
There he is. So there's the third appearance of a mannequin. This
Sorry,
one's
I
really.
got overexcited and I rang the bell for Manny this time.
No, I think we're caught up. Yeah, Jack Razzo's number 11. as the bathrobe ghoul, who gets it right in the face. And again, here's this kind of sleight of hand filmmaking. You see this shot of him coming through the door. You see Dwayne running up, winding up, and right on impact, they cut to this, and it's just an effective way to um, get the audience to feel the impact of that that blow to the head. And this is a really cool shot when you see it in action in the movie, because this one, the ghoul in the bathrobe stumbles backwards. If you look closely, there's blood dripping down his hands because he's taken a hit to the face. And as he stumbles backwards and moves out of the way, it reveals these other four ghouls, and it's just an effective way that the yes, and we do have a another Night Talk Daily Double, um, but this reveal is just an effective way of it's just a really nice, it's a really cool shot. I mean, it's very atmospheric, and it sets the tone that they are actually trapped. I've always felt that that kind of stuff is what sells it to the audience. That they're definitely trapped in this house, and so you basically um, the audience doesn't think about the little inaccuracies like we were talking about that come up. It just flows really nicely to kind of accepting the decisions the characters make to stay in the house and board it up. Keep in mind also at this point there were no Living Dead movies, there were no flesh-eating zombie movies, and so this was all new. And another strength of Night of the Living Dead is it brings the audience along with the characters into this chaos that you don't really know what's happening. And our
The one
next
sad
character,
thing about the shot is that for as clear as we see some of these ghouls, they're also some of the ones that we've not been able to recognize. So,
yes,
but the one on the
and,
left
and
and
they're
right,
and they're and yeah, they're going to pop up a lot as well.
yeah. But did we say that
We
was
did, yeah,
Tom
we did
Faust?
not we did not identify our Night Talk Daily Double in there. The gentleman not wearing a shirt, that is also Thomas Faust. So he was just dispatched in the front yard of the house, and now here he is as a separate ghoul in the backyard of the house. But again, this um, make a mental note of this group of ghouls. We've got another another ghoul with a torn shoulder, similar to Heinzman, wearing a jacket, torn jacket shoulder. We've got another fella here, blondish hair, and he's got what looks like a t-shirt. We've got our shirtless ghoul, and we've got our bathrobe ghoul. They're all going to be popping up again, and we
And
just see we have a
for those keeping score at home right now, so Jack Russo has 2 appearances, and Tom Faust has 2 appearances.
right, and then we're going to go to. And John, if you can see the comments, if you want to, I'm kind of jumping back and forth here. If you want to read anybody's,
Yeah,
uh,
Greg Minaccio is pointing out that the ghouls that scared him were Bill Heinzman, John Russo, and the ghoul that appears who gets shot in the field, grabs his face, and falls forward. Now,
yes, we like
that
him too.
I was going to say, yeah, that's I've got my Miss America Ghoul and Mr. America Ghoul, and Miss America Ghoul is Paula Richards, Mr. America Ghoul, Dave James. We will highlight him um, at the end of the line.
And Craig was saying, did Manny Quinn? He has Man E Quinn perish in the bonfire. Actually, Russ can answer that, but I believe there were mannequin parts thrown in the bonfire. So I say Russ can answer. Gary can answer that as well. But Russ, there's a behind-the-scenes pic of Russ taking direction from Tony Pantanella to throw gasoline on the bonfire. So I think Russ had an intimate knowledge of what was in there, and if there was any real bodies, I'm sure he's not telling. So we have here. This is where you start to get a little bit of information, and the gentleman on this radio is the famous Mr. Charles Craig in his first appearance in the film as the radio announcer. As many if you're a Night of the Living Dead fan, you,
Oh,
or anybody who watches this movie, those news broadcasts, whether it's on the radio or the television, just have so much impact. And that was thanks to not only Mr. Craig's delivery and performance, but also that he wrote all of that copy that um, eventually became canon in most Night of the Living Dead or most um, zombie films, not just George Romero films. We have an interesting comment here. Let me go back here.
go back to our T-shirt goal.
Yeah, Gary is saying that this is Ken Peters, the guy in the. So here we go.
Right.
We have one that's
Woohoo!
and Russ is saying yes, there were mannequin parts on the in the closing bonfire. But this is exactly what we wanted to happen. I would have pulled a close up of this guy if we had known that. Um, Russ had actually identified Ken Peters as a ghoul that we're going to see later on, and I'll talk about the provenance of that. But and we'll save that until that point, and maybe it is him. We're gonna, we will find out one way or the other. But that's exactly what we wanted to happen. We wanted everybody to start analyzing what's happening here and maybe calling out some people we don't know that they do know. So moving right along here, we've got now we start getting into the big ghoul shots. Well, oops, hold on a second. Let me go back there. We're gonna have we're gonna have a bunch here.
No sooner do we have Chuck Craig than we've got Chuck
Yeah.
Craig again.
Well, this is hysterical, and because I had a personal experience with this, I actually got to watch Night of the Living Dead in the theater with Chuck and Gary in Jersey City, New Jersey, at a convention that was showing a 35 print of Night, and it was pretty good presentation. The print wasn't too worn. The sound, more than anything, was fantastic because that theater was made for it. Um, but it was just funny sitting there with Chuck and hearing him on the radio, and the very next thing is Ben looks out the window and there's Chuck as a ghoul. So he's providing the soundtrack, the dialogue. That's Chuck, by the way, on the left side, and then over by the truck on the left side is Bill. On our left side is Bill Heinzman, but on the right side is Rudy Ritchie, and he's going to. Bill's playing the same ghoul, so we don't give him a. He's not a daily
We
double,
we
but
still love him.
yeah, we still well, actually we can't see it, but here he has the short hair. But this shot is going to be very interesting, and we will it's going because it's going to progress as the film goes on. With they just keep adding more and more ghouls, and we'll talk about what that means and where it fits into how the filming was done on this. But this was done for a very specific reason, um,
But
just
yeah,
to
if you note
basically
that, Chuck is wearing the dark long sleeve shirt, and Rudy is wearing his lighter but short sleeve shirt in this shot.
yeah.
That's
There,
one
and
of the
there
ways
there
that
are
they
other
can kind of
ghouls
identify
in
the
the back.
character.
And there are other ghouls in the background, but we're going to identify them as they come along. The more important ones are what John just said. But you can't see it in this shot, but Chuck's makeup is different. I think he pretty much wore the same thing as a ghoul on all the nights he was there, but his makeup is different. This is the makeup where like part of his face is torn or made to look like it's torn with dermawax, and whereas Rudy Ritchie's wearing the short sleeve shirt, and it's more of like a tannish color, or it's not white. You can see it's not a white shirt,
Oh,
and
this
that's
just
going to
in,
become
Jim.
yes.
Russ doesn't think that Ken Peters is in the T-shirt, but
Okay, well we're going to sort that
we'll
out, but
track
at
that
least
down.
we are on the track of Mr. Peters. We like that. Um,
And
yeah, Russ is saying a
Craig
blow up
Barter
of the
says,
frame should answer that question. So we will certainly do that if or after we're done with this. And John Volo saying looks like someone is kind of behind Chuck Craig. They are. Um, again, this was an establishing shot they did where people's ghouls start kind of like stumbling in from the corners or from the shadows. You'll see as we get to the next ones how this develops. In fact, this is it. So what's happening here is uh, it looks like the same shot. It essentially is, but you can see they've added more people. Um, who we could identify in here would be we do not know who the woman. So there's Chuck Craig again. You see him a little bit closer, and a little bit clearer, but next ghoul over, kind of like way off in the distance, is a younger woman in a house dress. She's one of the key ghouls that we have not been able to identify. And then the other guy between her and Bill Heinzman is Herbert Summer. So we have to update that. But essentially, what's happening here is as Ben keeps looking out the window, as he prepares he's creating a fire in the fireplace. He's readying the chair to be pushed out and out the door, and then he's going to set that ablaze. They keep cutting to more and more ghouls kind of surrounding the truck and, like we said, stumbling out of the darkness. There's actually one or two more in there. I think Marilyn Eastman's in there, but we're gonna have some better shots of her as we go along here.
yeah. The
Um,
nice thing is as you once you've kind of identified the groupings, then it's easier to pick up. Oh, like I think it's behind Rudy on the our right side of the truck. It looks like that's Marilyn. You just can't really tell in this particular shot, but with the other
right.
data, it supports that.
This group of ghouls is going to be the same, and we're going to see them a lot clearer later. Where you're really putting the faces to the name. But this is their first appearance. Again, it's a specific group of ghouls that was done as a master shot. At some point in the production, George must have understood that he needed, as he was getting other footage and cutting it together, he needed some kind of master shot of the ghouls slowly surrounding the truck. And you'll keep seeing this shot pop up. Um, 20 minutes from now, 30 minutes after Tom and Harry come up from the cellar, you see a further progression of this shot, which basically says that nobody's moved more than 10 feet in all that time. So, you know, they could actually, knowing that, you could probably bolt from the house and make it too. But since they're all just kind of congregating in one spot, and take your chances just running through the field. But again, all of this stuff comes really quick, and because of the way the movie is told in the editing, keeps the audience engaged. You don't notice these little continuity things. Um, Craig is saying here, Chuck looks like Caesar from Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is true. I never thought of that. He does look
Yep.
like that. Yeah. And Madison saying Rudy's Ghoul was the one that truly terrified me. Yeah. Actually, Rudy is going to pop up again, so
Very
we will
soon.
get to that. But so this is interesting. Again, this is almost the same shot. It's tough to see here. You can see it better in certain still photographs that were taken on the set. But this is essentially seconds later after Ben has pushed the lounge chair out the door and lit it on fire and kicked it off the porch. You can see the table leg is already on the lounge chair, even
Even
though
though
he
he
hasn't
hasn't thrown
thrown
it
it yet.
yet.
Yeah, he hasn't thrown it yet. It's already there. But who we have there from left to right is it's kind of tough to see, but that's Chuck Craig again, and his makeup is different. So Chuck's our
Oh,
daily
all right.
double there. And then yes, and then behind him is Jack Givens. So it's the first appearance of Jack Givens. So he is number 14. No, sorry, he is number 15. And then that's Rudy Ritchie again, but we're gonna save him. Rudy now has a shirt on that has white sleeves, or a white shirt with long sleeves, and he also has different makeup. But we're gonna save that one till later, John, because we have a much
Oh,
better shot of him. Uh,
sorry, I'm getting out of control here.
and we also have barely poking his head out of the fire. There is Lee Hartman. He worked at the Animators, um, that was in the same building as the Latent Image, and if you knew Lee in at least a bit, you could tell his personality. He was somewhat of a ham, and you could tell he would love doing something like this. He kind of reminded me of Darren McGavin. It was like that kind of like at least Darren McGavin's personality, as characters like Kolchak, that kind of like wise cracking, um, but just kind of like very light air about him. That's what Lee reminded me of, and Lee would definitely be a guy who would want to be a ghoul and want to appear in this movie. so, so two new people, and actually, Chuck Craig is the Daily Double there. This is his third appearance because now he's a different ghoul. The makeup is much different. Um, as we said, Rudy is also, but we're going to have a much better shot of him. This group of ghouls, though, there are a lot of stills of this. We believe that this is probably the first night that they did any major ghoul scenes because the makeup is very rudimentary. It's just grease paint. Nobody really has the gashes across their face, or like how Marilyn made herself up to like half of her face looks like it was burned or blistered or whatever happened there. It got more gruesome as it went along, and they figured out what they were doing. They didn't do this kind of harsh stage makeup with the dark, the really really big circles around the eyes. You have something to add there, John?
Nope, I think we're good for the next one. There it
Okay,
is.
and this is actually Kyra Schoen's first appearance in the film. We know her as Karen Cooper, but before she was Karen Cooper, she was the body at the top of the stairs. She stood in as
Stood
the
in for a
corpse at the
mannequin.
top of the stairs. Yeah. So there is number 17. And what do you know? I'm through my first page. Yay. Okay. Um, let me see. We were going to show the shot where you could actually see. You can see. Oops, I didn't want to do that. We were going to show the shot where you could actually see Kyra's face, but we decided not to do that. we
don't want to don't want
don't
to
want to
ruin the
destroy the. Yeah, let's not ruin the movie for everybody. Well, if we wanted to ruin the movie, we'd show that the hero dies, but that's beside the point. So. And Gary's pretty much the one responsible. Um, our next, this is actually no, this is not Carl's first appearance in the film, so we need the
Oh
Nighthawk
my!
double sound.
Yeah, I was doing Tom there. That's what I was doing. Keith Wayne.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, hold on. We've lost a. Oh no, we did not. First, we have Carl. We're going to get to Keith, but yeah. So this is technically Carl's second appearance in the film because he is the radio announcer at the very beginning. So that's two roles for Carl, and then we move ahead to Keith Wayne, whose real name was Ronald Keith Hartman, and he's our young hero Tom, who probably his peaceful nature. Um, his peaceful nature is what gets him in trouble. He should have probably smacked these other two guys' heads together, don't you think? What is somebody? Uh, Yeah, Gary answered Will. Will was asking, is the truck facing the house or is this a different location? Basically, the truck is facing the house there. Those are the trees that are,
Right
if you were
outside.
looking out the front porch, you would see those trees. And we have, is a group of ghouls called a gaggle, a pod, a murder, a school of ghouls, a group of ghouls, a Google. So, we're not going to determine that tonight, so we're just going to leave it as the group of ghouls. And that will be for another show. So, going on ahead here, let me see. Well, I should really start deleting some of this stuff because if you could all see my screen, you would probably all just shut the computer down right now and say, "This is we've had enough." um,
Okay.
here we go again. So Tom and Harry are, just to give this a little context, Tom and Harry are up from the cellar, and there's a big argument, and during the course of that, so we're probably talking at least 10 minutes since Ben pushed the chair out the door. I would think, right?
Yeah,
Barbara,
because
Barbara,
he's boarded up
Barbara
close
was
to the
still
mall.
knocked out. Yeah, Barbara was still knocked out on the couch. So it's got to be like at least 10 minutes. During the course of that argument, or like during a lull in the argument, Tom looks out the window and he sees this, and he says, "Yeah, it looks like there's 8 or 10 out there now." And so now we're seeing that same shot again. Like I said, they just keep adding more and more people walking from from the back. And we have the younger woman in the house dress again that we can't identify. Then we have Chuck Craig. And next to him, just kind of poking out of the shadows there, that's John Simpson.
John
So that's
Simpson, who
John's.
you'll see when he shows up more clearly in his boxers.
Yes. So he's the boxer. He's the boxer shorts ghoul, who's not wearing anything else but that. We were real glad John came along there. And then we have Herb Summer again is next to him. And then right next to the left of Bill Heinzman is the first appearance of, that is Roger McGovern. He's the guy in the hospital gown that kind of looks like a toga. People always say I like the ghoul in the toga, but
You know,
that was supposed to be a hospital gown. It does come across as like a toga, but I guess because of the way
Roger
it's draped over that one shoulder, right?
Roger's son Terry was a big kind of TV radio personality in the Bay Area. He's done a lot of voiceover work. I kind of gotten to know him recently, and he was shocked and surprised and humbled by the fact that I knew who his dad was, and I knew his dad was the ghoul in Night of the Living Dead, and was also in There's Always Vanilla, and was just so excited that people were still talking about him all these years later.
And what does he have to what does he have to say about that Night of the Living Dead, or is he aware that Night of the Living Dead first played on television in the Bay Area, on Creature Features, Bob
Um,
Wilkins' show?
yeah, because he knew Bob Wilkins. You know,
Yeah.
he didn't mention that specifically. I'll have to ask him the next time I talk to him. But he remembered Russ and the guys from Latent Image, and I had asked him, because the one thing that surprised me, I said, well, if you were kind of in this crowd in the late '60s and your dad was in this movie, how come you weren't in it? I guess he was either in the army or just coming back from the army. But it seemed like to me, it's like, well, of course, if you know all these people, like, wouldn't you have been corralled into being a ghoul too?
Mhm. So again, we're at 20 unique performers have popped up in the film so far, and where are we on the scoreboard, John? With
So,
those who
so
have played more than one.
Chuck's in the lead with 3, and
Chuck
we've
Craig.
got Yeah, Jack Russo, Tom Faust, Rudy Ritchie, who we've not we've talked about being in twice,
Yes,
and Carl
right.
Hardman. Um, those are all at 2 right
All
now.
with two. Okay. But so again, before we move on, this shot is important because this is the one that, like we're mentioning, it's a big establishing shot that they keep adding more and more ghouls to, and it keeps getting cut into the film as we go along, to establish that there are more and more ghouls surrounding. Marilyn's in there, but we're going to get to her soon. There's a few others in there, but again, we're going to get to them in a minute. First, we come to this gentleman, and this is Richard Ritchie, and he's the
Yay!
ghoul that attacks at the kitchen window. And there's actually two ghouls in that scene, but we can't identify the other fellow from behind. So there's no
Well,
way to confirm
and
that.
he runs off halfway through the shot, so
Well,
it's
he
like
just
he's
he
there,
doesn't
then he's
run. He just disappears. He disappears
yeah.
from one shot to the next. And there's literally two ghouls at the window. Richard gets shot, stumbles back. When he goes back to the window, he gets shot again. The second time, the other ghoul has left. And at some
He
point, there's like three. There's at least three sets of hands reaching through the window,
coming
but
through the
only two
window.
ghouls. So, and one of them ends up, is the clay hands. But again, the uh, that's the fun of the film, is finding all those little continuity things, not to make fun of the production, but to see how it was actually made. I would bet one of the people reaching through that window was Regis, because that would have been right up his alley, and the arms do look like his, these kind of like big, sleeveless, beefy arms reaching through and trying to grab everybody. And he's one of the key ghouls at the end, or extras at the end, who's reaching through the front door. But we have no way to identify that. So, and he also would have been there because he would have been doing especially the squibs on Richard here, um, which, as an aside, uh, Regis, when I interviewed him, said that he was, or that they did blow up, they did put a squib on Richard Ritchie, but not only that, but they blew up a mannequin head, and he was the only one who ever mentioned that. And he said they put so this is important, since I guess it didn't come out well enough, or he said they didn't use it because it was too gruesome. I don't think that was the reason. I would assume that it didn't, yeah,
Didn't
something too
sell
gruesome,
really
and
well.
yeah, I don't think it came off really well, and that's why they didn't use it. But there is a picture, there is a behind the scenes shot of Rudy with, not Rudy, Regis, with the mannequin in the field with the head blown off. So whether it's something that he did and assumed that they filmed, or he did practice, he at least practiced on a mannequin and tried to predate Dawn of the Dead with a head explosion. That would have been something else. So, moving on here. So let me see, just make sure we're at the right. Yes. So Richard is number 21, and we go on to, after Richard's ghoul gets shot at the window, we get this montage of shots introducing us to the now many, many ghouls that are surrounding this farmhouse. And what's really interesting about this is we can now identify two distinct groups of ghouls that are being, or that were two groups that were shot at different times during the production. This particular one, um, if you go way back, well, first let's identify who we have in here who's new. We're going to just stick with three of them for now because some of the others come up better. But the woman that's kind of a third of the way, she's the closest one. That is Norma Beardsley. That would have been Russ and Gary's aunt and their mother's sister-in-law. I think I've got that right. And then also Ella Mae Smith is in there. She is, she's the very, you can see there's two ghouls kind of center with our shirtless friend is in there. She's the very bright, wearing the very bright kind of house dress. Um, Not the one who's near the tree, but she's like pretty much in the center of the photograph. And then all the way to the right side in the nightgown, that's Josephine Striner, Russ and Gary's mom. So that brings us up to 24. There we
They
go.
just keep on coming.
Yeah, I'm finally, yeah, they won't stay dead. And um, again, if you go back to that shot out the back door, when we first see four ghouls congregating and coming forward, they are all in this shot. We have our shirtless friend Tom Faust, and then way in the back to the left, he's kind of well lit though. You could see with the torn shoulder. That was the gentleman with the wearing the jacket that's got the torn shoulder, and our other guy is in there with the T-shirt that
May or may not be Ken Peters.
that may or may not be Ken Peters, right? So so that shot out the
And
back
there,
door, and
I
then
was going to say,
the lighting of the Russo corpse, stand-in corpse on fire. Dragging Jack's ghoul after he's dispatched in the living room. That would have been filmed when this was filmed. And again, we have a big wide establishing shot that these ghouls are going to get closer and closer, and more are going to be identified. There's a few more that are in here that we can identify, but they're kind of like off in the darkness, or they're way off to the side where we can't see them yet. But just keep this in mind. John and I have kind of called this probably like the second group of ghouls. The first
yeah,
one would be the grease paint ghouls with the very basic makeup,
rudimentary makeup.
and then you get into this group, and they're going to have some substantial scenes later that we identify them in, and then we have that third group where the makeup got really they were really hitting their stride with the makeup, and just doing more elaborate gashes and blood, and faces torn apart, or kind of uh, bubbled over with blisters and things. Just so much more elaborate and creative.
And
So
there is one other thing that, as we talk about these ghoul shots, and particularly there will be a couple of women in dresses that kind of appear that we've not identified. There are two names in the end credits, two female names who we haven't connected to performances. And so those are the ones where it's like, it seems like the, the, the triangulation should allow for those two that are credited to potentially be identified from the lineup of
well,
female ghouls.
what you're talking about, Russ, by the way, has he's also said that Russ has also said that that's correct. Norma Beardsley was his mother's sister-in-law, so she would have been his dad's sister, of course. Um, but what you're talking about is, as you see, you know, Russ and Gary brought their mom in, and mom brought in their aunt. And when I when I met Josephine and was actually driving her, we were talking about Night of the Living Dead. I was driving her to Gary's festival. Um, she had said that her and another woman from work would come to the location, and would would act as ghouls, and then they would go to work the next day with some of the makeup still on, like that they couldn't get off, and also the fact that they were up all night filming as Living Dead, and so that kind of just added to the whole aura. But there again, it's everybody was bringing in people that they knew to make up this big contingent of Living Dead that we see in the film. So um, that's the way we start identifying people, is just to bring that up and ask those questions. Um, next, so again, we're after Richard is dispatched at the kitchen window. It goes into this montage of ghoul scenes, and first you had that one group of them we just saw marching across the field. They're actually marching away from the house, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's, again, we just look at uh, you look at the film as a whole, and we only look at those continuity errors to tell us how the film was made, not to make fun of it. In the flow of things, nobody notices that. You wouldn't really see that the house is, over here in this corner of that shot. But um, this next um, every shot now in this montage is the same group of ghouls, and um, as you can see in this shot, Richard Ritchie is there, or Rudy Ritchie is there, as we first saw him, and we of course have the nude ghoul front and center. That's Carol Wayne, and you just get that in there. So Carol Wayne is number 25, and Marilyn is in there, but we're going to get to here. You kind of see she's behind she's facing the nude ghoul, or maybe facing away from her. It's hard to tell, but you can see her nightgown there. But this gentleman all the way to the left side, this is Richard Sanderson. So yeah, we want a ding, and I have to update that. And we're going to see him a little bit later, but he's one of the elusive ghouls that kind of like just pops up um, and doesn't get as much screen time as these other guys. You can also see Heinzman's way in the background. He's actually by the porch starting to bend down and pick something up. But uh, now we get into where
Is that Dave on the right? We see the
yes, well,
hand.
we're gonna get to him
Okay.
instead of just getting to his. There we see him. So all the way to the left there is Dave Barber. That's his first real appearance. And we have our woman in the house dress again. We cannot identify. And let me see here. Yeah, I bungled that a little bit. We actually, Dave Barber is number 27. There we go. And we of course we have Chuck Craig there, but between Chuck Craig and of course we have the nude ghoul as well, Carol Wayne. But between Chuck and the woman, you could see a guy poking through there, and that is Jack Givens. That's why John has hit the Night Talk Daily Double. Jack is in a bow tie and or a tuxedo with a bow tie, so he's really changing up his costuming there. And
You
long
know what?
ago when I had first, what's that?
I'm thinking, did I jump the gun? Or is is this our first Jack Givens?
No, you got it right, Jack. This is
All
our
right.
Jack Evans should have been. He was in the lounge chair fire. That's where he
Yes,
had the
yes, yes.
basic makeup. You really couldn't see him, but he is there
He was there.
among the four ghouls that like aren't obscured by the fire. And then in this one, this is good. This is not a very good shot of him, but it's the first time he comes up like this. Again, this group, as we're talking about, including the nude ghoul, they kind of added her in at some point. She's not in that establishing shot that more and more ghouls keep getting added to, but she at some point she was there that night, so she's brought in, and then an interesting thing happens with that as well. But so far, this group, which we've called Group Three, the more it's the same thing. All people who we've identified before. The uh, head that you see all the way to the left over John Simpson's shoulder. He's the closest one. That's Herb Summer, and then over the other shoulder is Dave Barber, and then there's also the house dress woman. We just have this up for
Jack
reference.
Givens, Jack between John and uh, poor Jack Givens. It's like he always just barely shows up between two people.
Yeah, we probably couldn't get a good shot of that, but he is gonna pop up again. Here we have Heinzman's, this again, the same group of ghouls, but it's just featuring different, uh, featuring different performers front and center. So this one obviously is Roger McGovern, and you can see his makeup a lot clearer. The kind of looks like he was maybe in the middle of some kind of surgery that went awry, or they were trying to save him on the operating table, and that's why he's all messed up like that. But again, it's the third group of ghouls, and so far it's only been used for these kind of uh, atmospheric shots that are being peppered throughout scenes to just give you the feeling there's a bunch of these things congregating outside. We have Heinzman as the first ghoul on the left, and then you have a kind of contemplative uh, Dave Barber.
Barber, I love that
Yeah, I mean
plot.
that's hey, that's a cool take on it. It's like he's wondering, where his place is, or maybe he's looking at something in a tree and thinking about how that would taste. So, and then Roger McGovern, and then Herb Summer again. I really like that shot of Herb because he comes across as real creepy there. This is what I've always liked about Night of the Living Dead compared to other. Madison says the hospital ghoul is terrifying, and Will Phelps says, "Where's the beef?" Um, th- these folks had no frame of reference for any of this, and they just, you can watch this movie over and over and always find these little details, like Dave Barber playing the more contemplative ghoul or the curious ghoul, whereas like you never see like for example Herb Summer just like rush in, somewhere. He's always kind of like stumbling about and like looking over one direction or the other, and he's the one that gets shot at some point as well. And he never breaks that character, which is really interesting. Like you never
Yeah,
see hey, this is going to be a big siege scene. You guys have to come charging through this door. He never breaks the character of just kind of like a freshly dead corpse, that's like stumbling around. You really have to hand it to these folks. And then we have here's the I believe this is why Marilyn was kept in the background because they wanted to really give her a you know really feature her as the ghoul eating a cricket off a tree or a bug off a tree. So this is Marilyn's first appearance in the film. So John gave her the ding. That's correct. And we have to update this. Let's see here. I should get better at typing while I'm talking, and then this would go a lot faster. There we go. And again,
the
this
short
is all the
sleeves,
same.
me
There's
and
yeah,
Roger
Rudy
McGovern.
with the Rudy with the short sleeves. We established that's the second group of ghouls for him. He has the more subtle makeup on his face. He doesn't have like big scars or anything, but that's going to come into play later, where this batch of ghouls is more featured in not only the film but in stills. So again, the you really don't see, over the course of like Night of the Living Dead advertising, or if you look at the original still photographs, that got out there. Other than something like the famous day shot, with Paula in the field, Paula as the kind of goth-looking ghoul, and also a hospital gown. You never really get close-ups of those ghouls, but these were the ghouls that got all the kind of the money shots. So
Yeah,
it was just kind of, that must have been apparent to George that these are the ones that you feature, and that's why they mostly went back and did these kind of like inserts with all of these with this group of ghouls. I think he realized that on a certain level that these better present the concept of the living dead. So going ahead here, we get back into the house after we've had our little foray outside amongst the living dead, and we are introduced to Judy Ridley as Judy. So that's her first appearance, and she is number 29. And there we go. And let's go forward. now it's going to pick up we're going to pick up the pace a little bit because we don't have so many people to identify. Um, nope, this is a Night
Oh,
Talk Daily double because both Marilyn Eastman and Kyra Sean have already appeared as other characters before you actually see their main characters, which is Helen and Karen Cooper. So they go on the scorecard as two appearances in the film.
yeah. So
And
now we're up
then
to, there are 7 people with 2 appearances, but still Chuck Craig holding the line with 3.
yay, Team Chuck Craig. So now the film, so we kind of leave the chaos of the first part of the film, and now it starts to settle into its more science fiction premise, which is, radiation from a fallen satellite or a satellite that was destroyed in the atmosphere has rained down this unknown radiation from Venus, and is causing the dead to come back to life. Very science fiction premise, even though Night's considered a horror movie. Um, let's Russ is saying he wish he could be more of help in trying to ID some of these ghouls, but the wide photo is very hard to see clearly. On top of that, I am watching on my iPhone. We're gonna have to get Russ a bigger monitor.
We'll get good photos to you, Russ.
Yeah, but
And, and we no sooner say Chuck Craig is leading with 3.
that he is now 4. Yeah, so we get to the veil of mystery is lifting with all these news reports. But as we're about to find out, a lot of the same characters are now playing the news media, which is really cool, and that is including Chuck Craig, and probably one of the most famous roles in the film is as the TV newscaster. And I can attest that back in the 70s, when this first appeared on TV in syndication on Channel 7, the ABC affiliate out of New York City, these scenes were, I guess, freaking people out, so they would run a dramatization subtitle underneath these scenes because they were so effective. Um,
Have you seen any video that anybody's captured that anybody happened to record that has that, Jim?
I've never seen that, but again, that was definitely you would have had to get the whatever they were running from, the TV station. But back then they weren't running video; they were running prints, right? And they would
No, I just meant
superimpose.
if anybody happened to record one of those airings from that period, or if that was too early for even the early
It,
adopters of video
yeah,
recorders.
we're talking like 1974. It's 1975. I mean, I didn't know anybody who had a VHS
Yeah.
or even a beta deck back then. So, and it just wasn't really available. Um, but
Whoop.
made a mistake. So we have Chuck. We already got him uh, as another Night Talk Daily double. He's now up to what, 4 roles,
4
correct?
rolls,
Two
and
ghouls, two different ghouls, and we have Paula. Oh no, wait. We
so that
did
was
not.
me.
We did not identify Paula yet. Yeah, you're
Nope.
correct. We have Lee Hartman. This is his
Joins
second
the
role.
call with
He's
2.
he's the guy that's all the way to the right, probably like the next in line from Chuck. He's like the closest to Chuck. And then behind him this is Paula Richards, her first appearance in the film as a typist. And then behind her is Ross Harris. So that is they are number 30 and then 31. And
And Ross
all
Harris was the butcher, right? Or that had the
well,
was, was
he owned. I don't think he was a butcher. I think he owned meat
he
packing
provided
plants
the
or
entrails.
meat packing shops or whatever you would call them in or he was a meat distributor, and so he's the one who came up with uh, the blood and guts that we're going to see pretty soon. But all of these folks, except for Lee, actually worked at Hardman Associates, which is where this is being filmed. So this is, as Chuck described it to me, this was you can barely see it in front of him where the microphone is, but that's like a big mixing deck, and there's audio tape, or reel-to-reel tape deck built into that, and you can see all the different controls they have there. But they basically had a performance area where they would record things, and this is the reverse shot of that, looking into the actual studio. So they just made it look like a news studio. And let me just make sure I got that. So Ross Harris and Paula Richards we're seeing for the first time. That's number 30 and 31. And then we get into this fun bunch of people. Again, we're kind of lifting the veil on the premise of the film. It's not so confusing anymore once the TV comes on. Although the press and the characters kind of act confused about what's going on. They can't seem to get their story straight. But we have here George Romero. He's
Don
actually
Quinn.
Don Quinn. So he's actually given a name by
Yeah, Chuck didn't get a
Chuck.
name. It's like,
Yeah, Chuck didn't get a name, but George did. That's pretty cool. And then the three gentlemen that are being interviewed, that's Samuel Salito. Is it Samuel R. Salito?
yes.
Yes, Samuel, middle initial R. Salito. And then the general is A.C. McDonald. And the scientist is Mark Ritchie.
And
And
Mark
is
was
that,
Rudy's brother
yes,
and
somebody
Richard's cousin.
somebody help us with that. Either Russ or Gary knows that. Yeah, somebody's saying,
The Ritchie lineage.
yeah. So Richard was Rudy's cousin, but Mark would have been, I believe, Rudy's brother, and
Yeah, that
that's
was my
so
understanding.
we have almost as many Richies in this film as we do Striners,
Reiners.
and so as I get caught up here, so that's we're up to number 35. I got to jump ahead here. You can hit the daily double for Jack Gibbons. He's the reporter that's sitting there on the, in the hat, reaching in all the way to the right side.
So Jack
And
Gibbons now in second place. We've got Chuck 4 appearances, and Jack Gibbons has 3, and then a number of people have 2. When 2 roles in a movie is no longer enough to stand out in the crowd.
yeah, but I mean, really, who would ever catch that they appear this many times in the
Yes.
film? I never knew that. That I never even knew that was Marilyn until it was said on one of the commentaries, and then that was when, well, really the only commentary. I think Marilyn's the one who says it. So
Yeah.
if she didn't identify herself, I mean, how would you even know that that's her? It doesn't. Certainly,
Dad's confirmed
the
that
movie was
Mark.
not the movie was not made to be watched that way when you're going frame by frame and saying, oh, that must be this person over here. But it is certainly not cut that way. But we have one more in this little group here, and that would be
Dad's confirmed, and Gary says Mark was Rudy's cousin, and Russ says Mark was Rudy's brother. This is going to be like one of those.
and Russ is saying Mark was Rudy's brother. So we're gonna have to
I think it was
check back.
Richard. Well,
we'll sort that out. But again, we have the Ritchie contingent as well represented in the film. Mark Ritchie, by the way, if you've ever seen the Calgon commercial, he's one of the scientists in there, along with Russ. Russ is also a scientist. So you put those brainiacs together, and you're able to shrink people so that they can go into the wash and figure things out. Russ is saying brother for sure, and Gary's saying correction, my bad. So no
Okay.
problem. But we have one more daily double in there. You had hit the sound effect. That is Regis Servinsky in another role. So what is this for Regis so far?
I think this is 2 for Regis. We haven't
Yes,
seen him as another ghoul yet.
and we have so other than the three gentlemen in the center, you pretty much have the production crew. Jack Evans was with Hardman Associates doing the audio, but or doing sound effects and so forth. But he was, of course, Carl was there, Marilyn was there when they did this. They used Carl's car, his Lincoln
And
Continental.
sorry, Russ, we can't give you credit for being the cameraman in the scene since we don't see you.
But we do see this guy all the way to the left, and that's Gary literally recording the sounds of the movie. But it also works as being George's, the sound assistant who's carrying the recorder and following behind George. And yes, Russ is the one filming this on the latent image 16 millimeter at Claire, which Russ recently told me he got um, repossession of. Somebody who had it gave it back to Russ, so that camera has come full circle and is back in Russ Striner's hands. And maybe we'll get to see it at a convention someday. Hint, hint. And we have not to be outdone, we have one more from this scene, and it's again Jack Russo piling up his credits. He is the military driver
And that was his
or
uniform.
chauffeur. Yes, that is correct. So how many is that for? So we have Gary on the board for 2, and how many is that for Jack? That's 3.
That puts Jack at 3. So we've got Chuck leading with 4, still Chuck Craig with 4, Jack Givens with 3, and now Jack Russo has 3.
Who is going to make it? I can't stand the suspense. So anyway, going forward, another key component of the news media is Dr. Grimes, as portrayed by Frank Doak. And so he
You
is
know,
number 36.
as a
You, you
fan,
know, you know, he's one of my favorite. He says one of my favorite lines in the film: "The bereaved will have to forego the deep, dubious comforts that a funeral service can give."
I think Dr. Grimes is one of my favorite characters in Night of the Living, one of my favorite living characters in Night of the Living Dead. It's just a great standout performance. Just so
Well,
so
he's
mad.
he complements Chuck Craig perfectly as the newscaster, and then his no nonsense. Again, these guys were just writing their own banter kind of back and forth, and his no nonsense approach. Hey, you have to carry them to the street and burn them. And you have to burn them immediately, soak them with gasoline and burn them. He's not taking any other. There's no nuance to his
Yeah,
delivery, and the fact that he is this, he comes across as this authority figure in a suit and a tie, who probably is really great at cookouts and things like that. Here he is, saying, this is what has to be done, and not mincing any words about it.
yeah,
And
and he has the great story about the cadaver from which all 4 limbs had been amputated.
right.
That's just a great, when I remember just hearing that description and then picturing, it's like, one, why do you have a cadaver with all 4 limbs amputated? But okay, but then
I think they did that on purpose, because as he's saying, these things are dangerous. That's what I got from it. But it's the perfect grisly description
Yeah.
and it's delivered as if he's talking about like the price of beans, at the supermarket. He, uh, he's very confident in his delivery, and he's also, basically saying, yes, we have some answers for everybody, and um, uh, and then he goes on to relate this just awful story of having the cadaver at the at the university. So in the cold room at the university, it's even scarier. So
Uh, Greg says he's the Dr. Fauci of Night of the Living Dead, the voice of reason.
yes,
Love it. And Craig also was asking about was that Carl's car, and Gary had confirmed that. Yeah, the cars of Night of the Living Dead is a separate night talk. I'm sure to
yeah, we
come.
were we were going to start throwing the cars in, and then we said no, we better not do that. So
The latent image truck, the different versions of the
yeah.
pickup.
So next there. So
Oh yeah,
after all that, the next time we're introduced to anybody is this again another ghoul shot. This is as they're preparing to, make a break for the gas pump, and we go out again, and now there's so many ghouls that they're covering the truck. So you can't even see the truck in there, but again, it's that same establishing shot. They just keep adding more and more people to it, and or bringing them out from the back. So everybody in here we've already identified. I don't think there's
so
anybody new.
Herb on the left,
Yeah, there's
Roger
a
McGovern,
yes,
Bill
Bill Heinzman,
Heinzman, John Simpson, Dave
the little
Barber,
yeah, he's the head in the back, and then Marilyn's kind of like floating in there. She's in shadow, and then Chuck Craig,
Chuck Craig,
the
and then the
uh,
mystery woman.
mystery woman in the house dress, and then Rudy is behind her.
And can we tell who that is? There's that there's a head right off of Rudy's shoulder that you can just see
I'm
kind of a neck.
thinking, I'm thinking that's Jack Gibbons in the tuxedo because he's definitely floating around in these shots. But you would have to look at stills that were taken that would
Yeah,
be more clear. But he's definitely in this night that they shot where Chuck is in that distinctive makeup. As opposed to say like Heinzman pretty much has the same look the entire time. Or again, we have Roger McGovern there. He's Roger McGovern's always with that makeup with this group of ghouls.
yeah.
That's the night that Jack Givens was in a tuxedo. He looks like a freshly deceased person, so maybe from a wedding or something like that. And
Okay.
um,
Thomas
and he
says
didn't he
what?
didn't suffer any trauma, so he's not like he's not damaged in any way.
Yeah.
But we do have some new people here.
So
So
before we get to that, Thomas said, "What is the name of a cadaver with no limbs trying to move on a pile of leaves?" Russell.
you have that failure sound that you've been playing. That joke deserves that one. So, well, as I was saying, this previous shot is just before they start tossing the Molotov cocktails and breaking from the house. So you can see it's looking pretty bad. That's the whole point of that. Then when they start, Harry begins tossing the Molotov cocktails. This gets interesting. First of all, you just moments ago saw a shot of ghouls completely obscuring the truck, and now they are gone. And we have our okay. How do we approach this? Well, first we have a daily double. Let's get that out of the way.
Well,
We have two
actually,
daily doubles.
we've got that guy that's kind of front and center, who we saw next to the truck, and were not able to identify earlier. But there
Yeah.
he is.
So let me just jump back to that. So this tells us that this little group here, this is all the way back to the beginning where that's that fellow in the khakis or tan, whatever those pants would be.
when
called.
Jack was breaking the headlight.
Yeah, when Jack, it was done as an insert, probably after most people left, so they can concentrate on getting it properly. But that guy is right there, kind of contemplating a explosion of gasoline that's just ready to just be set ablaze. He looks like rather curious about the whole thing. But the other two that we can point out in here, and they are two daily doubles, would be behind him on one side of the truck is Regis Servinsky, and he's now appearing as the ghoul that you see him, or you most commonly see him, where his neck is kind of, he hung his head as if his neck was broken, and it's kind of like difficult for him to walk, and he just kind of hangs his arms down. Um, that's how he mostly appears in the film. We'll be seeing him pop up later, as well as in stills. He appears that way. But when we went back to that earlier shot, that insert, when you first see two ghouls approaching behind Heinzman as the cemetery ghoul, Regis was stood in. It pretty much looks like him standing in as a separate ghoul, wearing a dark jacket. And then to the other side of the truck, we have another Jack Givens ghoul. And this one is going to be interesting. We actually have some better shots of him. But this one, he does a lot. Oops, what did I do here? Let's see.
So this brings Jack Givens up to 4 appearances,
Yes.
tying Chuck Craig's 4 appearances. And in just behind them, Jack Russo remains with 3 appearances. And Regis now, as a result of this ghoul, also has 3 appearances.
And Jack in this shot, or a Jack at this point, I mean, he's played 3 pretty distinct looking ghouls compared to everybody else.
Completely
this
different outfit.
this kind of like worker. He looks like he's in work clothes or something, with the sleeves almost rolled up or whatever, and compared to the guy in the tuxedo, and then the other guy in the kind of checkered shirt that has the, like we said, the really rudimentary makeup. So we could obviously see, just by placing Jack Givens in different scenes and in different groups, what was filmed, at what point. We know that when he's in the tuxedo with that group, that would have been like one of the later things to be filmed. The scene where he has the, basic grease paint makeup, that would have been an early thing. And, as we're seeing, there's not much of that. But this is all we bring this up again because you're going to see how quick all of this changes really quick, really quickly. You have all these ghouls,
Keep in mind, this is
very
all
distinct.
chronological.
Yeah, very distinct group of ghouls surrounding the truck. There's this, so we have our guy in the khakis on the left here. We have this woman all in black. She's also unidentified. So that, John, you can play your failure noise.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And right there, Jack is the guy who's pretty much front and center. You can't see his head right now; is cut off out of the frame. But right behind him is John Kirch, who was a teenager at this time, and he was a friend of Jack Givens. Jack was the guy who brought him out to the set. So we have John Kirch's number 37, and to the other side of Jack Givens, kind of lurking behind there, that is Philip Smith. That is Ella May's husband. And he's going to have a bigger part in a little while as well. But again, keep your eye on these ghouls because it's going to change up really quickly. So I just messed up my thing a little bit here. Let me just put this back where it was. Here's our daily double for Rudy. It's such a good shot. We wanted to make sure to include it. But you can see Rudy here is now wearing, he's got the basic grease paint on his face, very pronounced like eyes. He's probably the closest Ghoul that you see this way, and he's got the shirt with the long sleeves, which Tom is about to tear most of it off of him. So that is the second. Is that the second one for Rudy?
That's Rudy's third appearance. So Rudy now
Rudy's third appearance.
tied with Jack Russo and Regis, but still trailing behind Jack Givens and Chuck Craig with 4 each.
Now I'm thinking that's Rudy's second appearance because he only plays two ghouls. Like we were saying, the ghoul in this obvious white shirt with the long sleeves, and then and then he's in the later group of ghouls that he's wearing the tan shirt or an off in a lighter color but not white with the
Oh,
short sleeves. Just double check that one. I want to make sure we're not counting too many. But right following Rudy getting knocked out by kind
yeah,
of
my
kick.
bad. That's not a new Rudy.
So that's two. We just had put him aside because he was just couldn't really be clearly seen in the shot, and I wanted to show him in
Yeah.
this one because it's one of the rare times we see that grease paint, more basic makeup up close on anybody in the film. So once Tom kicks the Rudy Ghoul out of the way,
So,
his place is quickly taken by this guy, and this is Bill Mogash, and he also was a colleague of Lee Hartman up at the animators, and so he would be number 39.
so Gary was saying, I might be crazy, but I think the guy we can't identify might be Tony.
Pantanella? Hmm. Which guy we can't identify?
Yeah, I was going to say, is that the one that was with Jack Russo when he was breaking the headlight? And
You're right because remember what we were saying. Gary may be right there. Remember what you and I were saying when we were looking at that shot. That guy obviously
would have been
has dark
some.
hair. He has
There
dark
he is.
hair, and yeah, his. Let's go back and look at that. Good catch, Gary. And as we were discussing before this, as I was discussing on the message board or on the Facebook page, you could very well be right. That could be Tony because that you could see the outline. I'm gonna have to blow that up for a better shot later, but you can see the along his hairline that
Yeah,
he
well,
has dark hair.
it clearly looks like he's got stuff in his hair to lighten the color, but I never would have jumped to Tony, but that
But
was also
again, we're
the other
talking
way
about
where
this. Yeah, we're talking about this as a pickup shot, and it would have been where you would have used the crew that was around.
yeah, Gary wants
Um,
you to go to the other shot, the one with the Molotov, because that
and
also
then the
makes sense.
other,
It would be closer to the fire than just an average.
well, what's interesting about this shot that also uh, goes with what Gary's saying is right behind him is Regis.
Yeah,
They would have been responsible for these, for basically setting a pool of gasoline on fire. So it could be why, I'm sitting here saying, hey, that guy's standing pretty close to that fire, not really knowing what it's going to do. Well, it would make sense if it was Regis or Tony,
yeah.
because 2 seconds before this, he could have been the guy throwing igniting it, basically. He could have been throwing a match in it or something like that,
Oh,
knowing where he had that set off. So
do you have
that
the?
makes a lot of sense. As I was saying, I had heard that. I don't know if it was from Regis or if it was from Tony himself. I believe it was from Regis when he was alive. Regis once told me Tony did play a ghoul, but there wasn't like a photo of it or some. I forget what we had talked about, but he was a ghoul for just one night or one portion of a night, and it would
Jim,
make
pull
sense
up
that
the shot with John Kirch. That one.
yeah,
Is that the one,
it
Gary?
it it really could be because he's got a lot of white on his face and he's got that blood dripping down. And what he's wearing is obviously, very baggy. Well, look, we could the hair looks very very much the same. For those that don't know what we're talking about, this is Tony, and you can see he has very dark features, but if you start putting the hair,
Gary says that's him for sure.
yeah, the hairstyle is very much the same. You figure you whiten the hair and you put a lot of white, or gray makeup on the face, and then put some blood on there. Let me see, where were we? Yep,
Excellent.
another one solved. Well, we'll look into it more. We could definitely get a closer shot now that we know what we're looking for, but that's a lot of really good stuff to go on. That's how it's done.
That's why
So,
we're here.
this is nothing that we haven't seen before, but again, you've got these, following Tom runs into this guy. Tom also runs out of the house without being armed at all, which makes no sense, but whatever. I guess he wasn't planning on, running into anybody, but he did. And then Bill Mogosh takes his place. It kind of goes to this shot of these guys kind of being peppered around, like in like a straight line, like walking towards Ben, as Ben has this kind of weird moment, like where he just doesn't jump right in the truck. He's like, I don't know why he stands there, but again, it's all cut for mood. It wasn't cut to be analyzed like this. So we have there's our, you know, first night
Early four.
ghouls, all with the Bill Heinzman, Lee Hartman, Jack Gibbons. You could see how even at that angle, well, we're going to have a better one of them. You see how different Jack Gibbons looks, or even how different Chuck Craig looks. Um, but they're just kind of like lined up there and marching forward. And then we had to throw this in because this is really disturbing. I showed this to John. He's like, "Oh my God!" When Tom, we don't know who this is. To me, it looks like it could possibly be. It could be Richard,
Simpson?
not Richard, Rudy Ritchie, because he gets back up. You could see there's like it kind of looks like John Simpson, but we
It looks
can't
like he's got a
identify
shirt or
him.
something on.
Yeah, so yeah, this guy's got a shirt on, and we can't identify John Simpson actually being in this scene of the ghouls surrounding the truck. But for literally a frame or two, Keith Wayne leans forward. This is basically the shot. He leans forward, and in that little side, what do they call those? The side mirrors. There's a name for it. When he leans forward, you get this really disturbing shot of this guy
Creepy guy.
peering through with just this, very you can't plan it better than that, and that's like subliminal filmmaking at its best, where you like insert an image really quick and people don't really notice it, but again, you're going through the film in this fashion, shot by shot, and all of a sudden that pops up. Um, it's like, holy cow, that is a pretty effective ghoul.
Yeah.
Pretty effective Living Dead.
It was
So
one
we
we
just
had
had
to
to,
show.
yeah, we had to throw that in because it's so cool. And here again we have, did we have? Hold on a second. Oh, I'm missing something. Hold on. It's my things just got my screen grabs got out of order. So
I
this
was gonna
shot's
say
not
it's
going
like
to make
yeah,
sense.
we
So
got another arrival.
we've got this guy, and then bam. This is interesting because if you looked before, all of these ghouls disappear from before, and now we have a different group. And this group is pretty much the group that was marching towards the house. Or not marching towards the house, marching across the field in that one
The wide
wide
shot.
shot that we saw earlier. And so we have well, way off to the left side, you could just see her kind of nightgown or house dress in her leg. That's Norma Beardsley. And then there's this younger woman in the dark dress who we cannot identify. And then there's this kind of heavy set older woman. She's wearing like also like maybe a bathrobe or some kind of house dress, but she has leggings on. She gets shot by Ben. And and this is like it's all staged from this angle. Like after she gets shot, she stumbles backwards. You can tell it, it's like a locked off shot. It's like on a tripod. It was something that was specifically set up. So that's why the ghouls change from what we're about to see. But it's really interesting if you watch this scene closely. We don't have the motion to show this. But if you watch it closely, before Ben gets in the truck, there's two different people standing in as stand-ins for Tom and Judy inside the pickup truck. And this is the pickup.
Recognizably not their heads.
Yeah, and I would guess that this is the pickup truck that drove because it doesn't have the Chevrolet logo on it. So this was a stage shot of the guy that we can identify to the right of the woman who's front and center and has the bullet exit wound in her back. That is Bill Burchinal, and he's going to pop up a little bit more later. Um, ooh, did I do that right? Let me see. We are on number. Yeah,
Number
that's
40.
that's yeah, that's correct. So he is number 40, and
And then
also
I
to
know that
the
LMA.
yeah, to the right of him would be, well, first would be Bill Heinzman. He's doing that kind of signature rearing back. He does that in several shots with the torch, being shoved at him. And then Ella May, as you said, and I believe behind Ella May is her husband, but we can't actually confirm that one, so we will leave that off for now. But yes, Bill Birchnell is number 40, and then we have another close up of the Beatles, the Fab Four here. That's Heinzman, Lee Hartman, Bill Heinzman, Lee Hartman, Jack Gibbons. You can see how Gibbons' makeup is really like very rudimentary. He's got very, very white face or like pale face, base coat on, and even his lips have been painted black. So it's not very subtle at all. And then Chuck Craig, where it looks like a lot of his makeup has possibly worn off. And then,
Gary thinks that the creepy ghoul from the truck window is he thinks that
yes,
might be Bill Burchinal.
you could very well be right. I should have thought of that because he does have a similar. Uh, it's funny because in the movie, Burchell is mostly seen uh, either like with a blank expression on his face or he's actually like smiling as he's grabbing wood or pushing his hand through glass, and
Yeah,
um, or like pushing the piano at the end. He
yeah,
jumps on the piano, he's like pushing it into the wall. So that's like very. It's just really weird that again, it's Night of Living Dead's about happy accidents and making the most of them, and that little detail crept in there is really awesome, um, because it's pretty unnerving, and it's something that you don't automatically catch, but you still subconscious. That's why I say it's like almost subliminal. You subconsciously still it still has like some impact.
yeah.
Um, Here you could see that now Tom and Judy are in the truck. Um, So it's not that, this is like a handheld, more fluid shot where Ben's waving the torch, and you can see we have the regulars in the background there, Heinzman and Hartman. And then we go to this. This is the last of a series of shots, and we have a new ghoul in there. That is Jeannie Anderson in the house dress, and she was, as we've seen with stills, with some of the more commonly seen stills, Jeannie pops up among this group of ghouls, which is Lee Hartman. She's right behind Lee Hartman, the guy with his arms straight up, or uh, you know, holding it up as if he's gonna like reach out and grab this speeding truck. That is Jack Givens. Bill Heinzman and Chuck Craig are on the, or Bill Heinzman and yes, Chuck Craig are on the ground, and the other guy's standing up, kind of like leading the pack towards the truck, is Bill Mogosh, and he's blocking. You can just see his hand and maybe his back is Rudy Ritchie, who grabbed onto the bumper of the truck and let it pull him. So again, this is the truck that could actually drive that they borrowed, and for the production, and it doesn't have the Chevrolet logo on the back. That's how you can tell the
No, with the
actual
switch.
truck that can drive. But so that's Jeannie Anderson is number 41. This, I believe, is the only shot that she appears in the film, but she appears in many more stills, or at least, a good, 5 or 6 stills, among this group of the what we call the early ghouls, or the first group of ghouls. And let's see, where are we here? My computer hates me right now. When they get to the gas pump. Um, Wait a minute. Oops, sorry. Before they get to the gas pump, we have this day for night shot. I've lightened it up a little bit so you can see what's happening. And yes, we have the two people that we could definitely identify in this would be Paula Richards. This is the first time you really see her as a ghoul. She's very clearly the woman that's trailing behind the truck with her arms reaching out, and she's got the hospital gown on, so it shows up very well. But the guy that's right in front of the truck, kind of like standing there, a little bit like hunched over, that's her father, Jason Richards, and that this is his first appearance in the film. So he would be number 42, and we're going to see a little bit more of him later. He pops up a little bit more often and in better view. Um, After the truck explodes, yes, we do have another daily double in here. After the truck explodes, we go to again that shot. It's actually now 2 shots. You're going to see in a second where we could more clearly see everybody. And as you can see there, the first guy that you can make out on the left, that's Bill Birchinall. You can tell him not just by his head, like his hairstyle and the shape of his head, general appearance. But he's wearing kind of like there's a lot of ghouls wearing jackets or sports coats. He's wearing like a long one that kind of goes to his knees. So you see that even from the back, you can kind of tell where he's at. If you just look out for that. And then we have our shirtless ghoul, Tom Faust, and Josephine Striner is in the nightgown, and all the way to the right is Bill Heinzman as his normal ghoul. Basically consistently playing the same ghoul, same general appearance. But we now have the reason John hit the daily double is we have who is that, John?
That is the late great Richard Ritchie.
Richard Ritchie. So he's the guy in this vest with the kind of like long, unkempt sleeves, white shirt, but he's wearing this distinctive vest, and we'll see him a little bit clearer later. But he's now colored his hair so it's like a silver or a gray.
He does a great little dance with Dwayne as Dwayne's making his way back to the house from the
That
pump.
that's an interesting, yeah. It's that's a we'll talk about that. We don't actually have a shot from that, but we'll talk about that for a second. Um, but this is the it. This is a really weird. I guess George just liked this, but and it's a weird stitch edit of. You could see the shirtless ghoul kind of jumps from one side to the other because you're now seeing like more of the frame. But this was way back when Richard, as the ghoul at the kitchen window, got shot. This shot started with those ghouls way back, past that tree that you could see is hiding a light. So there's like a pool of light kind of like spreading out from behind them. And in here, again, you can see, Ella May is kind of in the center. She's behind the woman in the evening gown, which we can't really identify. You can see our bathrobe ghoul is back there. Um, that's Bill Birchnell to the right of him. Norma Beardsley's there. The younger woman in the dark dress is there. The ghoul that was in the backyard with the torn went out the back door when Ben lights the Russo ghoul on fire after he's dispatched him in the living room. That's one of the ghouls that was back there. Of course, the shirtless ghoul was back there. I think he's standing in front of the guy with the t-shirt. So they're all in there. That same group of ghouls is just marching forward. But you're going to see it's going to again change really quick once we get to the gas pump, or the little skirmish that happens at the gas pump. I think I'm missing something here. Let me just check real quick. This is one of the gas pump shots, and you can see it's a different batch. But let me hold on one second. John, you can say something to get them.
Gary was pointing out we need to dig into the truck thing deeper. I think for some reason this is the non-running truck. I
Well,
think the giveaway is the Chevrolet logo is on the burnt truck, right?
is on the burnt truck. It's very clearly on the burnt truck.
But again,
As we were talking
there's
about
not
before,
really
we
a
didn't
vehicle.
really well, as we were talking about before, we didn't really get into the vehicles because there is like a continuity to the vehicles and should be discussed, but we'll have to save that for another night talk. I am missing a frame. Let me just grab it and we'll put that in there. Hold on one second. John, I thought you had something prepared for like this downtime.
It's like, sorry, I couldn't resist.
Anyway, okay, so here we go. We're now at the gas pump, and you can see the ghouls have changed a bit. We now have so you had that whole contingent walking towards the gas pump, and you're actually going to see Dwayne. If you get past this scene where he fights his way back, he does run past all of them. So that was a different group, but there are some holdovers. Like we have now Chuck Craig is in the mix. That's him wearing his
With the
shirt
backwards.
backwards. So you see the buttons on the back. And there's Paula Richards' father, Jason Richards. And of course, Josephine is to the, I think that's probably Lee Hartman, but we'll get to that. Josephine is there in
And
the
we
in the
don't know the
nightgown.
pajama
And then
ghoul.
yeah, so now we have this is interesting. We can't really identify this guy. This could very well be John Razzo, but he has lost at some point the bathrobe. So because he is wearing pajamas under the bathrobe. But here is a ghoul now with just the pajamas. The basic, you know, his basic look looks the same. The hair looks the same, but it's really hard to identify that. So we can't say for certain that's him. But going back to the one that I showed out of order,
Yeah, everybody wants to know who the
this is
guy
as
from
he's
The Cure is.
yeah, this is where he's Dwayne Jones as Ben is, swinging this torch around. It's basically shot sparks off. You can see Lee Hartman's here to the left, backing away. The the guy with the bald head, kind of poking over into frame there. That's Jason Richards, and then Herb Summer. He's the guy with the kind of front and center with his arms out. And there's a another woman wearing the Jeannie Anderson, the same dress that Jeannie Anderson was wearing, but now it's a different person. Hairstyle is different. Who we also can't identify her. The guy right above Ben's hand, Dwayne's hand, to the right of Herb Summer. This is the fellow that Russ was saying identified today as Ken Peters. And the reason
Oh,
he's identifying him as Ken Peters is because I sent to Russ one of the day for night ghoul shots where you can clearly see 4 or 5 ghouls. And this gentleman there that I'm pointing out now, just right next to Herb Summer and above Dwayne Jones' hand, he's one of the only ones in the day for night shots that actually pops up in this in the film. Most of the others that unless it's like Paula, is the famous one, um, but she was pretty close to production. Even Lee Hartman was in the day for night shots, but he's completely different costume than what he's got here. This guy is the only one who is consistent from the day for night to the film. So we could get maybe a better shot of him, but supposedly that is Ken Peters, who
well,
Russ
he
identified
definitely
not
looks
not well,
different
he
than the
didn't.
T-shirt guy.
What's that?
I said he definitely looks different than the T-shirt guy.
Well, yeah, the other guy has like his hair is receding, and he has like more of like a receding hairline. This guy has darker hair. But again, Russ wasn't identifying him from this shot. He was identifying him from a very clear
Okay.
shot where he's standing with Regis and um, Bob Wolcott. But that's Bob Wolcott was the owner of the animators, the company that did the credits and did the end, the end still frame animation on the on the stills, the grainy stills.
And
Um,
Bob shows up in stills, but not in the film.
yes, exactly. So Bob is one of the more famous ones that is just in those stills, but he's nowhere to be found in the film. At least not that we've been able to identify. So this ghoul would be, I think I'm 2 behind. So he would be number. Oh no, This is correct. He would be number 43. Ken Peters.
Excellent.
And then we're running into the home stretch. There's not a whole lot more people to identify until we get to the posse. Here's just another waving of the torch. Um, that's Norma Beardsley on the left. I thought the guy with his arm up is Jack Gibbons, but I'm probably wrong about that. And then next to him is Chuck Craig, and again Jason Richards, and right behind him is Paula. That's one of the few times. Again, Paula's one of those ghouls that you see in a lot of stills, especially that still of the ghouls marching in the daylight, up the field, and but she doesn't pop up as much in the film until later. She's featured a little bit, but she's right behind her dad. And then there's Ken Peters again, or the guy
Yep.
that we think is Ken Peters. And next to him is Herb Summer again, and Herb's got the bullet wound in the
Yep.
shoulder where he took it as he was marching up to the gas pump. And then the tail end of the Ben fighting his way back to the house. Another Night Talk Daily Double. This is John Russo, and he's distinctively wearing gloves here. That's how I was able to identify him. And the reason is we have a still or there exists a still of Jack knocking a torch. Um, he's either knocking it in the air. He's just knocking it out of the way. It's like it was thrown at him, and he's knocking it, and he's got Ghoul makeup on. And so I'm thinking that that was maybe something that they wanted to show, but it didn't come off well, so they didn't show it. So that's why he's got. But as it works out, Dwayne, as Ben turns around, when he can't get in, he's yelling to Cooper, and he turns around, and there's this, one ghoul creeping into frame with his hands out, and he's literally got gloves on. And then the next shot is Dwayne just thrusting the torch like out of frame, but you get the sense that he's pushed it into this ghoul.
Yeah.
So you would really not need to have gloves on. You could have put anybody, you could have put any number of people there, or just the hands reaching in from the way that it ended up coming out, but it wasn't done that way because I think they actually wanted to show the ghoul knocking the torch out of the way. So
Yeah,
there'd be no reason for Jack to be in makeup other than um, I'm betting that this is this kind of form-fitting, jacket and pants. This is what Jack was wearing when he put the baggy clothing on and stumbled around as the ghoul on fire. Actually, did we even show that one? I think we have to go back. I think we may have missed it.
Oh, we did,
Now that
because
I'm
that one actually. I was going to say this put Jack tied for the top with 4, but you're absolutely right. Jack being set on fire um, means this is Jack's 5th appearance.
right. Okay, so let's just go back and get that one out of the way. Really, it's because the frame did not load in properly. Let's get that one out of the way. Here we go.
Paul Brooks says, "Sounds like John
Oh yeah,
Russo
so
might
we
be
have
of Who's That Ghoul." We'll see. It's anybody's contest right now. Jack has we're going to show his 5th appearance. Chuck Craig is hanging in there with 4. Jack Givens at 4. Richie's
so
got
this
3. Regis
yeah
got 3.
we got sorry, we got off track a bit because this is where we discovered the Tony Pantanella ghoul, but this is the best frame that could grab of Jack Russo actually lighting himself on, or being allowing his body to be lit on fire and stumbling out of the way. You gotta give the man credit for that, to go that extra mile. And this is, I don't care how much padding you're wearing. This is awfully dangerous to do something like this for the sake of
Don't try this
a
at home.
movie. And yeah, don't try it at home. And also to give credit to Bill Heinzman, he also allowed himself to get caught on fire, and he wasn't wearing anything special. Um, you know, whatever. It just adds so much realism to what's happening in the film, and you got to give these guys credit for getting into it that much. But we even noticed when we were looking at these frames that he did this twice because the ghouls, you could see the a little bit back there behind the truck is the bathrobe ghoul is backing out of the way. The positioning and the manner in which they back away changes from the couple shots of this that are seen in the film. So it was obviously done more than once. I don't think if I did something like that once, that would be it. And it would, you know, but incredible. So Jack is currently in the lead then with 5. Is that correct?
Jack has got 5.
Cool. All right. Let me just reorganize this a little bit, and we'll be on the way here. Let's
And
see.
I'm willing to
Where are you?
bet that nobody starting out tonight was thinking that Jack Russo had 5 appearances in the film.
5 appearances in the film. Um, so again, here we don't really have a lot of like new people to go over here, but let's see. This is again this is the feasting scene, and I think this is mainly what um, this is again the third group of ghouls, the ones that have the more elaborate makeup. Marilyn is in there. Um, what you could see here is Paula. So on the
Roger
left,
McGovern.
Roger, Dave Barber, Chuck Craig. He's kind of like doing a. He's like really swinging his arm like it's difficult to walk without really pushing yourself forward. Herb Summer, Marilyn's back there, and the one guy, of course, you could see uh, Simpson in the boxer shorts. But between him and Herb Summer, there is again Jack Givens wearing the tuxedo,
Yep.
and covered by the truck or obscured by the truck is Bill Heinzman, and then you can see the
Who's right at the
shoulder.
door.
Yeah, you can see the shoulder of Rudy Ritchie. He's in the short sleeve shirt. He's in the
Coming through
process
the
of
front
climbing
window.
on the hood of the truck. So we go through all those scenes. Here's one of Paula's like better featured shots during the feasting scene. Again, it's this same group of ghouls. It's all just featuring them a little differently. That leg you see there, I believe, is Dave Barber to the left, and then Bill Heinzman, Herb Summer, and Roger McGovern. And as this proceeds along, as Paula moves in front of the frame from right to left, Chuck Craig comes in holding the intestines, and then it cuts to this where he's struggling with it, and Jack Evans is the one who grabs a piece of them and pulls until they rip apart, and Chuck hangs on to the little extra bit. I like that he's got that the fingernails have been painted black, like they've turned color. That's like a nice
And
little
if you
touch.
haven't watched the entrail wrestling frame by frame, you're missing out.
What disappoints me about the entrail wrestling is that there isn't a really clear frame of it.
Yeah.
And this is Dave Barber biting it. You can't really see it well because it's hidden, but he's biting into the what looks like a liver or an organ. And another nice little touch is he's got blood running down his hands, and that's Bill Heinzman stooped over to the left side. And then oh, this is the first for her. So we do have a new person. This is Betty Ellen Hawhey. She's actually, you see her walking to the truck, but I didn't use one of those frames. This is a better frame to introduce her. Her face is completely messed up, just like Marilyn's. Uh, with the more intricate makeup, the more much more than just grease paint, and it's pretty effective, um, especially for 1968. And she's biting into something, and this shot kind of pops up a few times.
Yeah.
You,
So Rudy's walking by, arm in hand, and John Simpson's kind of coming the other way, and they kind of cross over.
yes,
And
and the cool
later
thing
on,
with
I was gonna say later on when they do the cutaway, when Harry looks through the window and says, "Good Lord," for those of you who have seen the work print on the Blu-ray, that's where they go to a day for night shot of ghouls outside the house. But in the film, they cut back to kind of another take of this where Betty's still kind of in the foreground gnawing on her bone, but Rudy and John kind of continue to kind of walk back and forth in opposite directions.
yes, and the that that shot in the cut negative, the conformed negative, was actually spliced and or had to be re-spliced together in order to fit that day for night shot. When they decided to take the day for night shot out and just fit that in and not change the pacing of the soundtrack, they had to actually find the two pieces to assemble the shot that you just mentioned. So we noticed when we were examining the original conformed negative that there was a splice in the middle of that. It was probably being used for something else, and then it was taken out of the film. And when they had to go back and get something else. Um, look for something else. They found the two pieces and put it in. Um, Madison is saying that is the shot that made an impact on me. I still get goosebumps to this day. And Dwayne is saying he washed it down with a nice Chianti. And Craig is saying, I guess about the Jack Russo shot, is that the same denim jacket Tony was wearing? And actually, it was not. Tony wears a different jacket because I actually still have it from Tony. Tony gave it to me, and we talked about selling it, and unfortunately, he passed away. But eventually, we'll find a good home for it, maybe in the Living Dead Museum, and get the whatever money it brings into his wife. So then we have, moving along, we have John Simpson in a close up. He's gnawing at a bone, but I think that's probably silly putty. He's pulling off the bone. And in a nice little continuity shot to this one, where that's Rudy Ritchie carrying the arm, as you said, he's now eating um, in, from an actual arm, and that is Paula Richards in another role. So what is that for her? That would be number
That
three,
brings
correct?
Paula up to 3. So she's in the third tier behind Jack Russo with 5, Chuck, Craig, and Jack Evans each with 4, and Paula joins Regis. I guess just Regis now with 3.
And then
Steve
we have one more, and this is another Night Talk Daily Double. Of course, that's Roger McGovern. His makeup is pretty gruesome looking. When he turns to the camera or looks past the camera, you can see he's also the opposite side of his head. His temple is really torn up, and then that's John Simpson again in the background. But that is Carol Wayne now in a evening gown with. Carol Wayne was the nude ghoul. She's now in an evening gown, and she has what looks like a Dinah Shore style wig. So
Yeah. So for anybody who thinks that no, that's the nude ghoul that just put a dress on, the wig is what really sells it as a different
yeah,
character.
sells it as a different ghoul. So that's the only. Again, this is another example of she appears in more stills that way than she does in the actual film, which is just this background scene. But so I believe the body count is correct at 44. Correct? We would have been
Yeah.
at 43, but for the performer count, the number of unique performers we've seen so far is that we can identify as 44. It would have been 43, but we added Ken Peters. Um, Now, this is also interesting. This is the same group of ghouls, but we've added another one that we've seen before. This is just a clearer shot of Rich Sanderson, and he's wrestling what looks like a snake.
Snake
Um,
foo, as Joe Bob would
yeah,
say.
Russ was saying that he believes that those are intestines. I think from the way it looks and the way he's like messing with it, it's like he plucked a snake out of the grass. But
Yeah,
either
and
way, it's
I
a
think
it's a nice little touch. And there's a little bit more to this. Again, now you can see how the shot progresses. And again, we were essentially looking at a variation of this shot much earlier on. If we go way back here, when after is dispatched, Richard's ghoul is dispatched at the wind. This is the same thing. It's the same players.
yeah,
Carol Wayne at the front and center. So this would have all been, again, it's a good hour into the movie, you know, and they haven't changed position, or an hour and 15 minutes into the movie now, and they haven't changed position from where they were. But it's all that same group of ghouls, which we're calling the third group. They have the more complex makeup. And
yeah. Well, and I think because that scene was that, or that shot of Rich Sanderson was from this scene, as opposed to from the feast. I think that's why it seems like it was more likely that snake in the grass.
Gary is saying now all you people know like Autopsy of the Dead is 2.5 hours long. So
And now here are going to be the people clamoring for the longer version of
for the
Autopsy.
longer version of Autopsy, yes. So moving ahead, they're in the house. This shot is when startles Ben and Harry to where they look out the window, and then that's when you see Betty Ellen gnawing on the bone again, as you mentioned, um, replacing the day for night shot. But then we get into the TV broadcast, and now we're with the posse, and we can identify the posse, even though it was all done on one day. Again, you have groups of posse members that kind of are orientated together in like little different pockets, and this is one of them. This is pretty much the guys who are in the field. The guy with the walkie-talkie is going to be seen later. He's kind of like the leader of this little band of the much larger posse. Whereas McClellan, George Costanza as the sheriff, is the leader of another little group, and they're all kind of converging on this area. The gentleman holding the machete, which is a really nice touch because the idea is that the posse, again, like, nuance is Night of the Living Dead's all about these little details like this. The idea is that the posse, as they shoot the ghouls, another posse guy is coming up and lopping the heads off with a machete. And then nobody's actually touching these bodies. They're running around with meat hooks and sticking them into the corpses as they drag them and burn them. So it's a pretty, gruesome task that these guys are. I mean, look at the guy right there in the older gentleman with the hat on. I mean, this guy's been hunting ghouls his whole life. He looks like it. He's just right in the middle of it. But it's done with as gruesome as that the process sounds and what's being portrayed here. They do it with like this air of authority, which is to me that's one of my pet peeves about the remake is that the posse is just so over the top, um, rednecky and ridiculous that you
Yeah.
can't like take that seriously. Here, it's like you get the sense, well, these guys are doing what they determine needs to be done, and no matter how horrible the task is, they're out there not really enjoying it, but digging in and getting the job done. And
What
and
was
then we
the
get,
what was the
what's
name
it?
of Machete?
Oh,
Not
you're
Danny
right.
Trejo.
This is uh this is Robert Fries, according to Gary. Gary was friends with this gentleman.
And Larry points out LMA's mailbox.
Yes, LMA's famous mailbox. LMA now, when she's at a convention, has a photo of her with her mailbox that she signs. The world
And
famous mailbox.
Daz weighs in to say, apparently posse guy with the black t-shirt, white pants, and handgun is George Burdell.
Cool. Well, now we have to note that because he pops up a lot later. Am I correct? Is that no? That should be 45. Hold on one second. I got ahead of myself. 45. So now we're really just down to identifying posse members. Um, we're going to get to some well-known, some obscure. Just advance through here. So here we've got.
Says, Robert brought the machete because he knew he'd be able to find himself.
What's that?
Gary says Robert brought the machete because he knew he'd be able to find himself.
That's a funny. That's just a funny thing because that's why Dick Heckard pinned one side of his hat up. Now Dick is in here, but we'll get to him in a second. The other thing is having actual Pittsburgh police there with with the police dogs. Just again, it adds like this air to the. You just didn't see this in movies back then. Prior to Night of the Living Dead, the protagonist in the movie was like let's just compare Vincent Price, Last Man on Earth, which it's the same source material.
Yeah.
Richard Matheson's book, same source material as what inspired Night of the Living Dead. But Vincent Price, first of all, is this world class actor. Not that the others aren't world in their performances, but you knew Vincent Price as an actor. He
Yeah.
was you already knew Vincent Price as almost a personality, and he plays a doctor, so he's the authority figure in the movie as well as the main character and the one who's dealing with the situation of being the last man on Earth. Um, in this one, the authorities are, the main characters are ordinary people. The authorities are, kind of these background characters, and they have this kind of like bravado sense of that they're going to get the job done, and not realizing how quickly it could spiral out of control as we're seeing throughout the movie that just the situation can get worse and worse and worse and spiral out of control. And these guys just seem to be like content that as long as they're armed, they're going to just go through the countryside and blow everything away that moves.
Oh,
But
yeah.
the
No.
yeah, let's go back. We have the fellow in the the fellow in the cowboy hat is Jack Gibbons. So there's number
Jack
5
Givens.
for Jack, right?
Fifth appearance brings him into a neck and neck tie with Jack Russo. It's all Jack all the time.
All Jack all the time.
And now,
Well, yeah, so we've already, pretty much identified Tony as a ghoul finally. This what was always known as Tony's main appearance. He's one of the featured posse guys. Also has like a nice bandolier of bullets slung over his shoulder. And as Craig was asking before, I think could that be the denim jacket Tony's wearing? You could see it's a bit different. And I don't think Tony would have ever let this jacket off of his body. So you see him constantly with the jacket as much as you see the little stogie in his mouth all the time, which Tony pointed out to me. I almost never light it. So the the that was a funny story that George always told, at least in one of the commentaries, and then it went on from there that the main fireworks pyrotechnics guy was always hovering over these explosives with a little stogie in his mouth. But as Tony said, it was never lit. It was just almost never lit. So, and there's our man Dick Heckard. So Dick would now be number 46. There we go. And moving forward from there, we get into the nitty gritty of what's happening here with George Costanza as the sheriff everybody loves. Um, and also to the right there, sitting there, that's a better shot of Jack Givens as a posse guy. But before we get to George, well, we just got to George, I want to point out this guy. This is the shot just before that. The guy with his back to the camera, that is Frank Coke in his second role in the film. He's a rather tall posse member wearing sunglasses and the cowboy hat, and he's frequently together with Al Croft, who we'll see in a minute. But going back here, so of course George Costanza as the sheriff, Conan McClellan, and he added a lot to his performance and kind of neat take on a country sheriff again who goes out there in the suit and the tie, loosened tie, but still the suit and the tie and the cap with the cigars sticking in it. Just adds a lot of flair to the authorities that are out trying to help everybody. And then we have, of course, the famous Chili Billy Cardell, playing himself, since he was a broadcaster in real life. I don't know if he was really a newsman, like your on the scene newsman, but um, he was a broadcaster. He would be number 47. And rounding out the posse is another shot of Bill, but want to call your attention to the gentleman in the white shirt, kind of heavy set older man. That is Randy Burr. It's really hard to get a shot of him at this point. He's actually standing near, that's George Casano with his back, and also the guy wearing the backpack is Vince Servinski, but we're going to get to him shortly. But keep Randy Burr in mind. That's his first appearance there, and he would be number 48. And then we go to the blackout in the house, the power goes down, and then the ghouls start attacking. We don't really have anybody new here, but again, if you remember back to when we were talking about the ghouls surrounding the truck, here's basically the same, or not the surrounding the truck, around the truck when the Molotov cocktails start hitting. Here's basically that same group. You have Jack Givens. He's the one who picks up the table leg and kind of leads the charge, right? And then John Kirch, he's kind of next to him, and kind of pulling on the door frame. And then we have the unidentified woman with her hair in a bun. She's wearing all black. And then we have Ella Mae Smith. And the next shot is interesting because all of this kind of moves around. You now have, this is Philip Smith picks up the rock and he's going to throw it through the window. He actually throws it through this window, but it's inside the house. It's a different window that it goes through. And now you can see John Kirch has just moved over about 10 feet. And next to him and he's just banging on a bare piece of wall. And then next to him is Regis Servinski. And as I was noting to John, look at the makeup on his face. We really don't see that in the movie. I thought it was maybe shadow, but nobody else has that kind of shadow on their face. And he's just got looks like blood, just pouring down. And then as they start pounding, we have, of course, Bill Heinzman. He's kind of front and center. His hand comes through. Regis is next to him. You can't see him, though. His hand is around there. And then that's Bill Birchinall. And I think Gary is correct. You can see that, yeah, if he was frowning or kind of grimacing, he would have that, that look on his face. And this guy I can't identify, but to me, he looks a hell of a lot like Ray Romano. and it's funny because he pops up and wearing what looks like maybe a denim jacket, and he just looks like he maybe showed up at the location like that, and he just stuck him in with like little to no makeup on his face.
People that are familiar will remember that though Bill was right there at the front door.
Right.
He'll come in through the window.
Yeah, Bill likes to say whenever he knew the camera was gonna, pick up the ghouls, he would, as a ghoul, he would make sure that he was where the camera could see him. But as soon as like somebody was going to be shot, all of a sudden he was like out of the way and not found. So that's why he lasts through pretty much the whole movie, because he was never in a position to get shot. So yeah, as they start pouring into the house, we have again that if you recall back to that wide shot of them all marching, and it gets closer and closer. This is basically that same group. We have again. I believe that's Jack Razzo in the bathrobe and Bill Birchinall, and then you can see the long coat. Yeah, and in the Russ Streiner bathrobe, and you can see Jack or Bill Birchinall's long coat, and Ella Mae, not Ella Mae, she's going to be coming. This is Norma right behind him, and then as this shot progresses, there's Ella Mae, and with his head poking around. Between these two ghouls. That's the shirtless ghoul, Thomas Faust, and also here we have a better shot, well, without seeing his face, but we have a better shot of Richard Ritchie now,
In
as
his
you could
vest.
kind of see his hair is light, and he's in the vest. And then Herbert Summer, and behind him is Josephine Striner, and we had to have a good shot of that because that's probably her clearest shot in the film. And so that's the no big reveals with the big group of ghouls as they come through the house. I
Russ
do have
just weighed in to say Carl knew Dave Craig, who was the real public safety director for the city of Pittsburgh. Carl and I took Dave Craig to lunch, persuaded him to allow us to hire off-duty police along with the canine dogs. Police cars were in the city garage for various maintenance repairs, so he allowed them to be driven by the police officers. And a similar situation with KQV radio station for their traffic helicopter.
right, and here we are with the traffic helicopter. And I just updated the count, by the way. With Randy Burr, we should have been at 49.
Okay.
I believe he was the last one that we identified. So I have to delete a few here so we can get the last frames in as we wrap it up. But yeah, so in the KQV helicopter here is Bob Harvey, Robert Harvey, a captain known as Captain Bob. He would do traffic reports from this helicopter. The helicopter at the time, in the mid 60s when he started doing it, was somewhat of a novelty. And here it is ending up in the posse scenes. And this was supposed to be a longer scene. Um, as this lands, and you can see the door is off. It normally has a door. Um, the fellow who again had the walkie-talkie was supposed to run up, and Bob would get out and run over to him and interview him. And there does exist a still of that, so we know that they shot it. But Bob said that was one of the things that they filmed that was cut. So his big scene was kind of cut. And Bob did tell me pilot, his usual pilot's name, but it escapes me and I couldn't find it in the interview we did with him. So that's going to be one to look up. But Bob Harvey would be number 50.
And I did the daily double because I think.
Well, we're going to get to that in a second, but you are correct. There is a person in here who's going to up their score, and it would be, bam, that guy. Um, of course, we have Bill Cardille to the far right. He's walking with the coffee cup, and Randy Burr is in there, but it's the guy in the cap to the left of George Costanza in the kind of checkered shirt. That is Chuck Craig in his fifth role in the film, and he was in fact marching up the field with the posse. Um, and we also have two new people in here. This is the guy in the cap looking up is, leaning against the pole. That is Al Croft. And next to him is Vince Serbinsky. He's got the straw in his mouth. And so they would be numbers, what is that?
Was Bob Harvey 49 or was Bob Harvey 50?
He's 50 because we added everybody's, it's advanced a number because we've added Ken Peters. We know Ken Peters is in there somewhere. We just gotta we gotta get to him. So,
So I think this gets us to 52 with
yeah, so
Vince
this is
and
gonna
Al.
be 52. I'll get that caught up in a second, but I just want to go to a little bit further in this shot. We now have actually three more people. So we're going to be at, let's see,
55?
51. Let's see, 52. Yes, we're going to be at 55. So I might as well just jump ahead to that while I'm over here. Let's see. So this is Steve Hutsko holding the camera. He was Bill Cardille's actual cameraman.
Yes. Mobile camera
But
unit.
yeah, here's the mobile camera unit. That's how they actually filmed the news back then. And to the right of Bill, you can see the nurse and the coroner, or doctor, but he's in the Willard coroner car later. The nurse is Ivy Booth. She was Marshall Booth's wife. And Marshall Booth was a sound engineer for Hardman Associates. Gary knew him well. And the coroner is John Messenger.
Can you hear my mic? You hearing me?
Just barely. I want to do the. Hello, we're back on the air.
Yeah, I could be running out of battery, and I only have to charge, and I only have this one mic. So let's get through the rest of it. That's John.
We've run Jim's computer into the ground.
Yeah, Dave James knew him as a neighbor and as an insurance man. So he was the guy who identified him to me. And speak of the devil, there he is. There's your number one guy, Dave James.
So there's Dave James. Somebody was asking about him earlier. One of my favorite tools. Yeah, Jim, we're getting static through your line.
Really? You can't hear me at all?
Just barely.
How about like this?
Now it sounds about the same.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll suffer through it because we're just about ready to wrap up here.
So folks can see in this shot, although now I'm getting my feedback through your mic too. Norma Beardsley on the left. Go in a bit. Tony Passanella. I think that's it might be Randy Burr right behind Dave James.
Yes.
I think Vince is actually behind him in the shot. You see George Casana to the right between the two cops. And then Dick Heckert to the right of the K9. Did we advance the number for Dave James?
Yeah, Dave James is 56.
56.
So, John, you kind of talked them through these last two.
Yep. And then we get into the credit sequence.
Let's first do the daily double for Randy Burr. This is how you better know Randy Burr in the film.
So Randy Burr wearing out his here. So he gets his second appearance in the posse.
Also like this.
Hook in hand. Oh, it sounds like my audio is bad too, Jim.
I still hear you.
Yeah, it's hard for me to tell.
Yeah, I can still hear you. You're okay. I'm not good.
And on the left. Gary in his third appearance.
So, how do we wrap that up, John? Can you hear me?
it's like the computer is found us and killed us.
So you're going to have to wrap it up, but what was the final score there? Who has the most hits? Who has the most rolls?
Coming in. Tied at 5 appearances each. Jack Russo, Chuck Craig, and Jack Givens. Next highest, Regis Servinsky with 3, Paula Richards with 3, and Gary with 3. If you're holding something up, Jim, we can't see it. And now I'm not getting any of your audio. There you are.
I was saying to say goodnight because we lost all that power. You gave this the wrap up. We're on 3 hours.
Yes, yeah. Thanks everybody who joined in and was willing to hang out to learn this trivia about all those people that helped make Night of the Living Dead what it was. It was a lot of fun for us. I know to just kind of do the math, and it is great to identify some more people tonight. So that's really exciting. And it just goes to show that 55 years on, we can still learn more and further the knowledge. Night of the Living Dead. So, thanks for everybody for joining us.
Earbuds only last for 3 hours.
Earbuds have a 3-hour battery life. Thank you, Russ.
Good night, everybody, and we'll see you next time on Night Talk.